While the Bible only briefly mentions the Nephilim in a few sparse verses, a far older and more expansive ancient text was uncovered that tells their story in full, this time from their own perspective. When the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered in 1947, among them were scattered remnants of the enigmatic Book of Giants. This mysterious manuscript predates the biblical flood and offers a rare glimpse into the dreams, conversations, and eventual downfall of the Nephilim. Could this be nothing more than ancient myth? Or might it bridge crucial gaps in our understanding of what really unfolded before Noah ever began to build his ark? But before we explore further, if you're new to this channel, consider tapping the like button and subscribing. We'd love to hear where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. Now then, let's begin, shall we? The Forbidden Book, long buried by time. Throughout history, there have always been texts hidden away, deemed too dangerous, too strange, or too revelatory for common understanding. Among these forgotten relics is the Book of Giants. It is a fragmented tale of primordial events that took place before the Great Flood erased the ancient world. This elusive text recounts the story of the Nephilim, offspring of angels and human women, who once walked the earth as towering beings of immense size and appetite. Their story, both haunting and powerful, intertwines with that of Enoch. Enoch was a righteous man, one who communed with God and was taken before he ever tasted death. Unlike the more familiar accounts in Genesis, this narrative opens a window into a world where the line between heaven and earth had not yet hardened. It was a time when divine beings walked among mortals, a time when monsters, born of forbidden unions, roamed freely across the land. The Book of Giants was not included in the Bible as we know it today. Its passages were scattered across centuries, hidden deep within caves, almost vanishing into the shadows of history. And yet, fragments endured. They survived in the Dead Sea Scrolls, unearthed in the mid-20th century, and in ancient Manichaean manuscripts recovered along the winding paths of the Silk Road. Why was this book deliberately excluded and left to decay? Perhaps because it reveals the story of angels who transgressed divine law, of sacred knowledge intended only for heaven that spilled recklessly into the realm of men. It speaks of giants whose spirits never truly died. Themes that echo across the oldest myths of many civilizations, tales of titans, of floods sent to purify, and of wisdom stolen from higher realms. The Book of Giants fits seamlessly into the silent spaces left by Genesis. It expands on the fleeting references to heroes of old, men of renown, who walked the earth when the sons of God took the daughters of men. In just a few cryptic lines, the Bible hints at an immense saga, then moves swiftly on. This ancient text pauses there, filling in the void, revealing the Nephilim's fate in the strange days before the first drop of rain ever fell. At its core, the Book of Giants is a story about lines crossed, boundaries between heaven and earth, law and rebellion, divine knowledge and mortal grasp. It chronicles the cost of reaching beyond what was meant to be known. It paints a world where the veil between realms was thinner, where divine order was breached, and paradise itself unraveled. The Nephilim, caught between two natures, heavenly and human, powerful yet flawed, embody the chaos born when natural design is overturned. Their origin story begins with the Watchers, angels gazing down from their celestial posts, entranced by the beauty of mortal women. Enthralled and undone by desire, they descended to earth. These Watchers took human wives, and with them, they shared heavenly skills, knowledge never meant to pass into human hands. From these unions came the Nephilim, giants not just in size, but in hunger, ambition, and disruption. The very fabric of creation strained beneath their presence. The Book of Giants provides something incredibly rare, a perspective from within. It gives the Nephilim a voice. We glimpse their inner world, their dreams, their unease as judgment looms, their frantic attempts to avert the doom closing in. Unlike many ancient texts, this one dares to speak from the vantage point of the condemned. It invites us to witness their awakening, slow, tragic, and inevitable. This forgotten history challenges our assumptions about the ancient world. It implies that the division between good and evil, human and divine, was far less clear-cut than we often imagine. Perhaps this moral ambiguity is why the text was quietly set aside, left to gather dust while simpler, cleaner narratives endured. Yet in stitching together its fragments today, we uncover something both unsettling and strangely profound. A shadow history, a forgotten age where angels defied heaven, giants trampled the earth, and the entire cosmos demanded purification. The Book of Giants remains a powerful testament to humanity's enduring obsession with what lies just beyond the veil, and a stark reminder of the price that can come with seeking too deeply into divine mysteries. Picture, if you will, a world entirely unlike the one we know now, a realm where human lifespans stretched across centuries, where the air itself pulsed with richness and vitality, where the dividing walls between heaven and earth were not yet solidified. This was the world that existed before the Great Flood, a world that Genesis barely hints at, but which comes to life in vivid color through ancient writings. Texts like the Book of Giants and the Book of Enoch describe a land overflowing with abundance unknown to any later age. Plants grew to impossible sizes. Animals thrived in perfect balance with one another and with their surroundings. The first humans lived in close harmony with the earth, yet carried within them distant memories of Eden. They built no cities at first. Instead, they dwelled in open valleys and sweeping plains, untouched by natural disaster. Adam and his early descendants still retained knowledge passed down from paradise. They could name the stars, understand the language of birds, and read the signs in flowing water. This was a time when human consciousness still shimmered with divine echoes. Dreams might carry messages from beyond the veil, and that veil, the boundary between realms, remained thin and permeable. According to some ancient sources, even the sky itself looked different in those days. The waters above the firmament, that mysterious celestial ocean mentioned in Genesis, formed a glowing canopy over the earth. It filtered sunlight and maintained perfect temperatures below. Some scholars believe that this antediluvian atmosphere may explain the incredible longevity attributed to early humans in biblical traditions. But despite all its beauty, this world would not remain peaceful for long. As human populations multiplied and spread across the land, they began to drift away from their original harmony. The descendants of Cain built the very first cities. They forged metals, shaped tools, and gave rise to arts that were as dangerous as they were beautiful. Meanwhile, the line of Seth held on to older ways. They lived in simplicity, stayed close to nature, and worked to preserve the wisdom of Eden's memory. Then came the Watchers. These celestial beings, neither fully angels nor gods in the sense we understand, looked down upon the earth from their stations above. Their purpose was to observe, nothing more. But as they watched humanity laugh, fight, love, and create, something strange stirred within them. They were drawn to the intensity of human life, brief though it was. The passion of mortals, the depth of their emotions. These things awoke unfamiliar desires within the Watchers. And what followed changed the fate of the world forever. The Book of Giants records how these heavenly sentinels chose to abandon their posts. They opted to take on physical forms and descend into the world of men. They came down to a place near Mount Hermon, a borderland that would one day lie between modern-day Israel and Lebanon. There, they made a solemn pact with one another. They vowed to take mortal wives, to teach humanity divine secrets that were never meant to leave the heavens, to live among men as gods in flesh. And under their influence, the world changed rapidly. Human villages swelled into powerful cities seemingly overnight. New technologies and knowledge flooded into human society: metalworking, weaponry, cosmetics, even astronomy. Women were taught the properties of roots, how to mix herbs, and cast binding spells. Men learned the movements of stars and the secrets of forging blades. What should have taken millennia to develop naturally happened in a few short generations. But this breathtaking acceleration came with a grave cost. By revealing heaven's mysteries to beings unready to wield such power, the Watchers shattered the balance of creation. Knowledge that was meant to unfold gently and slowly was now in the hands of mortals who lacked wisdom. The Book of Giants tells us that humanity became drunk on their newfound power. Instead of cultivating harmony, they turned their gifts toward conquest and control. And worst of all were the children born from the unions of Watchers and women, giants known as the Nephilim. These beings were enormous in size and unquenchable in hunger. They devoured the Earth's resources at horrifying rates. They consumed plants, then animals, and when that wasn't enough, they turned to humans. Ancient accounts describe them as towering over the tallest men, their immense shadows darkening entire villages. But these were no gentle titans. They were monsters with the strength of gods and the reckless cravings of men. Neither fully divine nor truly human, they lived in a tormenting middle state. Mighty, yet hollow, endowed with power, but aching with unfulfilled purpose. Their very existence represented a rupture in the divine order, a cosmic fracture that could never be repaired. As their numbers swelled, the once perfect world descended into chaos. Forests were leveled to satisfy their appetite. Animals fled, hunted to extinction. Humans retreated into mountains and deserts, trying to escape the giants and the strange hybrid creatures birthed from the Watchers meddling with nature. The skies darkened with unnatural storms. The earth itself split apart, releasing vapors and waters from hidden depths. Creation, which had once moved in divine rhythm, now trembled at every seam. Genesis reduces this state to a single line. The earth was filled with violence. But the Book of Giants expands that phrase into a haunting, panoramic collapse of cosmic order. Yet even in this fractured world, some humans still remembered the old ways. They lifted their eyes to the stars and knew something had gone deeply wrong. They cried out to the heavens. Why were the stars now dim? Why did the seasons no longer follow their course? Why were their children born into fear? Their prayers rose like smoke, curling toward the throne of the Most High. He had watched in silence as his creation twisted into madness. Now, the time for silence was ending. The earth before the flood had become a crucible for forbidden knowledge, a battleground for cosmic forces. Something had to give. Either the entire experiment of creation would be abandoned, or it would have to be cleansed. Fallen stars and divine crimes. Ancient texts speak of beings who were neither man nor God, but something in between. Creatures who once bridged the space between sky and soil. The Book of Giants gives them a name, the Watchers. They were sentinels of heaven, dispatched to observe creation's unfolding without interfering. They were the eyes of the divine, positioned among the stars, witnessing the young world's every move. In Aramaic, they are called Iron. In Greek, they are the Grigori. According to most traditions, their number was 200. Each one held specialized knowledge of heavenly mysteries, the movements of stars, the healing properties of plants, the cycles of weather, and the alchemy of metals. Their mission was clear: watch, record, report, but never interfere. And yet, something about humanity captivated them. Perhaps it was the brilliant flicker of mortal life, so different from their own unending existence. Perhaps it was the elegance of women, their hair, their form, the grace of their movement. Or maybe, what they longed for most was freedom, the ability to choose, to make mistakes, to feel the full depth of emotion that perfection had long denied them. Whatever the reason, these celestial guardians began to grow restless. They whispered among themselves, sharing thoughts they dared not speak aloud. Their leader, Samayaza, finally voiced the unthinkable. "Why should we remain apart?" he asked. "What if we descend and take wives from among the daughters of men?" His idea ignited like fire among the Watchers. To leave their posts would mean betraying sacred duty. But once spoken, the idea could not be buried. They gathered on the heights of Mount Hermon, an ancient peak that straddled the threshold between heaven and earth. There, they took a terrible oath, each one binding himself with dreadful curses. They would descend together. They would take human wives. They would teach divine secrets to mortal men. It was the first great rebellion since the fall of Lucifer himself. The Book of Giants describes it in stunning imagery, stars cascading from the heavens, abandoning their appointed places in the cosmos, and descending into the realm of men. They took on human form, appearing as beings of towering height and breathtaking beauty. Their eyes shimmered with the light of distant galaxies they had left behind, and their voices resonated with tones reminiscent of celestial harmonies. Human women were entranced by these strange, otherworldly presences. The daughters of Cain in particular welcomed them eagerly, seeing in these visitors a path to power their tribes had long been denied. Marriages were arranged between mortals and the Watchers. Beneath skies shaded with unnatural colors, Celebrations were held to mark these forbidden unions. The Watchers took their chosen brides to secluded valleys and high mountain ranges. There, they established new dominions, kingdoms of their own, separate from ordinary human settlements. But marriage was only the first step in their transgression. A far graver offense followed swiftly. Each Watcher began to unveil divine secrets, knowledge meant to remain hidden until humanity matured enough to handle it with wisdom. Azel taught the arts of warfare and beauty, weapon-making and cosmetics. Berkiel revealed the signs of lightning and how to predict weather patterns. Kokobil shared the mysteries of stars and constellations. Shamsiel unlocked for humanity the paths of the sun and deeper understanding of celestial movements. Under the instruction of these fallen beings, human progress accelerated at an unnatural, blinding pace. Villages evolved into sprawling cities almost overnight. Women adorned themselves with powders and ornaments crafted from formulas never meant for mortal use. Men forged weapons from unearthly metals and turned them against one another with deadly skill. What should have taken millennia of slow, guided growth instead unfolded within mere generations. But such unnatural speed came with devastating consequences. Rather than enlightenment, this knowledge brought only turmoil. Humanity was not yet ready for these sacred truths. They lacked the moral foundation to balance newfound power with the responsibility it demanded. Technologies designed to serve were transformed into instruments of conquest. Arts once intended to uplift became tools of manipulation and vanity. The divine gift of knowledge, given prematurely, without wisdom or context, proved not a blessing, but a poison. And still the Watchers went further. They were not content merely to teach. They began tampering directly with the natural world itself. The Book of Giants hints at horrific experiments, the merging of species, the creation of hybrid creatures, attempts to reshape the very fabric of life according to their own flawed visions. These acts gave birth to monstrosities, unnatural beasts that roamed the wilderness, further fracturing the delicate balance of creation. As their violations mounted, the Watchers began to undergo changes themselves. Their celestial nature, once radiant and pure, grew increasingly clouded by human emotions. Jealousy, fear, regret. Though still powerful, their abilities began to fade. They had crossed the boundary between heaven and earth and could no longer return. Now trapped in a middle realm, they were no longer entirely divine, yet not truly mortal either. But the most disturbing change of all was their awakening sense of time. These beings, who had once floated outside the flow of years, now felt time pressing in around them. They sensed the weight of days, the dread of endings, the passage of irreversible moments. That realization brought desperation. Their actions grew more frantic, more frenzied. What had started as a seductive curiosity curdled into obsession. They sought to reclaim their former glory, not through obedience or repentance, but through greater knowledge and increasing power. They constructed grand temples where they demanded worship as gods. They required offerings and blood sacrifices. They founded dynasties, bloodlines intended to carry their influence into future ages. And all the while, heaven remained silent. The seats they once occupied in the celestial order now stood empty among the stars. The harmony of creation had been distorted, and that distortion echoed outward like ripples on water. But the rebellion would not go unanswered. The Book of Giants makes it clear. Judgment was already being prepared in the highest realms. A reckoning was being set into motion, one that would not only deal with the fallen Watchers, but also with the world their actions had corrupted. The Watchers, sensing the storm they had set in motion, would sometimes gaze upward in rare, quiet moments. They looked upon the night sky they had forsaken and felt the chill of divine displeasure. Their dreams, once filled with heavenly melodies, now echoed only with dread and warning. But the path they had chosen could not be reversed. Their fall, once begun, would carry them to its bitter, inevitable end. From these illicit unions between the Watchers and human women, something entirely new was born. Offspring unlike anything the earth had ever known emerged into the world. The Book of Giants calls them Nephilim, translated as the fallen ones, or perhaps more darkly, those who bring others to fall. From their first breath, they were different. Born already larger than ordinary infants, their eyes wide open and aware, their appetites insatiable. They grew at terrifying speeds. While human children required years to reach adulthood, these hybrids became fully grown in mere months. And they didn't stop growing. Year by year, they continued to expand in both size and strength until they towered above their mothers and even over their watcher fathers. Ancient sources speak of giants reaching 30 cubits tall, over 40 feet in height. While such dimensions may be exaggerated through centuries of oral tradition, their physical distinctiveness was undeniable. Some legends describe them as having 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot. Others speak of their pallid skin, which never tanned, hair in impossible hues, eyes that gleamed in the dark like those of beasts. Perhaps most grotesque was their double row of teeth, an unsettling trait repeated in several sources, that allowed them to rend flesh with unmatched savagery. But far more disturbing than their monstrous appearance was their inner nature. The Nephilim embodied the worst of both lineages. They carried the power and intelligence of the Watchers, but without the Watchers' original grace or discipline. They bore the passions and impulses of humans, but lacked empathy or restraint. They were beings of pure appetite, forever hungering. For food, for experience, for domination. Their diet quickly turned from awe-inspiring to horrifying. At first, they consumed only plants, entire fields devoured in a single sitting. Then they moved on to animals, hunting the largest beasts to extinction. But when prey grew scarce, their hunger turned darker. They began devouring humans. The Book of Giants depicts scenes of terror, people eaten alive, blood drunk from bowls, even acts of cannibalism among the giants themselves when desperation took hold. And yet, for all their brutality, the Nephilim were not without intelligence. In fact, they were exceptionally clever. They absorbed the secrets their fathers had taught them and expanded upon that forbidden knowledge. They built vast structures, palaces, temples, and monuments to their own glory, using techniques that would vanish after the flood. They composed poetry, crafted music, invented written languages, and studied the stars with fascination. Their minds, sharp as their claws, made them natural rulers. They crowned themselves kings and demanded reverence as gods. Many humans submitted, either out of fear or by being seduced by the giants' unnatural charisma. Under Nephilim rule, human civilization advanced, yes, but at the cost of its soul. It became a twisted shadow of what divine intention had once imagined. The Book of Giants assigns names to these beings, names that echo across ancient mythologies. Ohiah and Hea, sons of Shemahaza. Maha, son of Berkiel. Gilgamesh, who appears here as well as in Mesopotamian legend. Aram, Hobabish, and others. These were not nameless monstrosities. They were distinct individuals, each with unique powers, temperaments, and domains. Each inherited a fragment of divine knowledge from their Watcher Father. Ohiah, for instance, had an unparalleled grasp of the stars. The movements of the stars were known to Ohiah, who could predict celestial events with a precision that defied ordinary comprehension. His knowledge of the heavens was inherited from his Watcher Father, refined and expanded by his own observation. Hea possessed mastery over metal and flame. He forged weapons so powerful they could pierce even the most impenetrable armor. Maha had a different gift, the ability to interpret dreams with piercing clarity and to travel vast distances in trance-like states, crossing great regions with his spirit. Gilgamesh, among the mightiest of them, held strength that surpassed even that of his formidable brothers. Each of their names carried meaning, reflecting their dual nature, born of heaven and earth. They saw themselves both as sons of specific watchers and as rulers of territories across the earth. But this hybrid identity created a wound within them, a perpetual conflict of belonging to neither world entirely. That constant sense of dislocation fueled their ambition, deepened their anger, and often drove them to rage. Human reactions to the Nephilim were far from uniform. Some people worshipped them as divine, building temples in their honor and offering sacrifices in hopes of gaining favor. Others fled to isolated places, hiding in remote valleys and mountains to escape the tyranny of their rule. A few courageous individuals dared to resist, though such defiance almost always ended in bloodshed. The Book of Giants records that there were pockets of humanity who clung to older ways. These groups preserved their faith in the Creator, keeping sacred traditions alive even as giants dominated the broader world. One of the most emotionally wrenching elements of the story is the relationship between the Nephilim and their human mothers. These women had carried giants in their wombs, nursed them in infancy, and watched them grow into beings they could no longer understand or control. Some mothers remained fiercely loyal, refusing to abandon their monstrous children, even in the face of fear and horror. Others, overwhelmed by despair, fled or took their own lives, unable to reconcile the children they bore with the destruction they caused. The Watchers themselves held complicated feelings about their giant sons. They had broken divine law to create them, and they bore the weight of that responsibility. Some fathers tried to guide their offspring, offering wisdom and warning, urging restraint. But such lessons were rarely heeded. Other Watchers, by contrast, embraced the chaos they had birthed. They encouraged their sons' aggression, seeing in their rise to power a reflection of their own rebellion against the heavens. As time passed, the situation grew more entangled. The original Nephilim began to bear children of their own, sometimes with human women and other times with their fellow giants. These second-generation hybrids were generally smaller in stature than their ancestors, though still immense by human standards. With each new generation, physical size diminished, but their numbers grew exponentially. What emerged was a layered society of giants, structured by lineage and strength, who governed over distinct territories. The toll on the natural world was immense. Forests vanished as giants consumed massive quantities of timber for fuel and construction. Animal species, once plentiful, were driven to extinction by relentless hunting. Even the climate began to change. The ecological systems that once sustained life started to buckle under the pressure of Nephilim consumption. A paradise turned to desolation, abundance eroded into scarcity. But perhaps even more devastating was the impact the Nephilim had on the hearts and minds of humankind. Under their influence, human society grew increasingly cruel and chaotic. Warfare became a constant feature of life. Giants led vast armies, waging brutal campaigns against rival factions. Human sacrifice, once unthinkable, became commonplace, first to appease the giants themselves, and later as a twisted religious ritual. The very arts that the Watchers had once shared to elevate humanity were now used as tools of oppression. Knowledge turned inward, becoming a weapon rather than a path to enlightenment. Centuries after the Watchers first descended, the world had become unrecognizable. The harmonious creation described in Genesis had collapsed into a nightmare, ruled by giant kings, populated by enslaved humans, distorted by monstrous hybrids, and buckling under ecological ruin. Heaven's silence could not endure forever. The moment of reckoning was drawing near. Judgment was not only due for the rebellious Watchers who had started this cascade of corruption, it was needed for the shattered world they had left in their wake. For thousands of years, the Book of Giants seemed to exist only in whispers. References surfaced in other ancient writings, here a line, there a fleeting mention, but the book itself was thought lost to time. Unlike the Book of Enoch, which was preserved in full by Ethiopian Christians, the story of the giants had all but vanished, leaving behind only echoes in myth and memory. Then, in the spring of 1947, everything changed. A Bedouin shepherd named Muhammad Ed-Dib was searching for a lost goat among the limestone cliffs near the Dead Sea. Out of curiosity, he threw a stone into a cave opening and heard the sound of pottery shattering inside. Drawn by the noise, he entered the cave and discovered clay jars holding ancient scrolls wrapped in linen. This single discovery would lead to one of the most significant archaeological finds of the modern era. Eventually, 11 caves were uncovered around the site, near Qumran. Inside them were more than 900 ancient documents. They dated from the 3rd century BCE to the 1st century CE, preserved in secret for nearly 2,000 years. These included biblical manuscripts, community rules, calendrical records, and numerous religious writings that had never been seen before. Among these treasures were fragments of a story long believed to be lost, a text written in Aramaic, carefully inked onto parchment. These fragile slivers told tales of giants, of haunting dreams, and of destruction that crept closer with each passing moment. Scholars soon realized what they had found. They were piecing together remnants of the fabled Book of Giants, a text spoken of in antiquity, but assumed to have disappeared forever. The process of identification was laborious and meticulous. Many of the fragments were no larger than a credit card, their surfaces worn by centuries of exposure. Some bore only a few lines of legible script. Researchers had to work like puzzle solvers, aligning edges, matching handwriting styles, and following incomplete narrative threads to assemble the story. What made this discovery all the more remarkable was its age. The Qumran texts predated every previously known reference to the Book of Giants by several hundred years. This wasn't a late invention or speculative myth. It was an authentically ancient work, circulating among Jewish communities long before the birth of Christ. Its presence among the Dead Sea Scrolls suggested it was held in high regard by the Qumran sect, most likely the Essenes, a group known for their strict purity codes and apocalyptic worldview. But the story of rediscovery did not end in the caves of Qumran. At nearly the same time, scholars working on ancient Manichaean texts from Central Asia began to notice striking similarities. They realized that the Book of Giants had been preserved, partially and in fragments, within the teachings of Manichaeism, a religion founded by the prophet Mani in 3rd century Persia. Mani had incorporated the tale into his sacred literature, ensuring that parts of it survived where others were lost. These Manichaean fragments appeared in a wide range of languages: Middle Persian, Sogdian, Uyghur, and even Coptic. They revealed how far the story had traveled along the Silk Road and into distant civilizations. And within these diverse versions were episodes missing from. The Qumran fragments made it possible for scholars to begin piecing together more of the Book of Giants' original storyline. Especially valuable were manuscripts uncovered at Turfan in present-day China and at Medinet Madi in Egypt. Together, these discoveries revealed something extraordinary. The Book of Giants had once enjoyed wide circulation across vastly different civilizations and spiritual traditions. It had been read and revered by Jewish communities in ancient Palestine. It was known to Manichaean merchants traveling the routes of Central Asia, and it was studied by Christian monks in the deserts of Egypt. Despite being officially excluded from both Jewish and Christian religious canons, the text endured. It survived through hidden transmission, adaptation, and translation across centuries. That recovery is still ongoing today. Modern technologies now allow scholars to access what was previously unreadable. Advanced imaging can detect faded ink invisible to the naked eye. Computer algorithms assist in matching tiny fragments by handwriting style and linguistic patterns. With every breakthrough, another sliver of the ancient narrative is brought back from darkness into light. What makes this rediscovery so profound is not only the tale it tells, but the insight it offers into the minds of the ancients. The Book of Giants serves as a vital bridge between Jewish apocalyptic thought and the broader mythological traditions of the ancient Near East. Its inclusion of Gilgamesh, hero of Mesopotamian epic, alongside figures rooted in biblical literature, shows how fluid and adaptable these stories were. Ancient cultures didn't just preserve their own traditions. They borrowed, merged, and reimagined them across religious boundaries. For biblical scholars, this text sheds light on some of Genesis' most cryptic verses. The brief reference to "when the sons of God came into the daughters of men" now opens into a richly detailed account of celestial rebellion and its consequences. The mention of the Nephilim, those mighty men of old, is no longer just a passing phrase. It becomes part of a vast, complex saga filled with cosmic drama. Where the Bible offers hints and fragments, the Book of Giants delves deeper. It gives voice and background to the mythic history that once echoed throughout the ancient world. And perhaps even more importantly, this resurrection forces us to rethink our understanding of early Jewish theology. The conventional assumption of strict monotheism and rigid boundaries between Judaism and pagan cultures begins to blur. The Book of Giants shows us that certain Jewish communities were willing to engage freely with stories from neighboring cultures. The lines between Orthodox and unorthodox thought appear far less fixed than later religious authorities would claim. This text also addresses questions that remain relevant even now. What are the limits of knowledge? Where should the boundary lie between humanity and the divine? What are the consequences of exploiting nature? And how dangerous is it when power becomes disconnected from righteousness? Though told in mythic language, these themes reveal deep anxieties about order, morality, and the fragility of creation. Today, the Book of Giants exists only in fragments. Much of the original text remains missing, damaged, or incomplete. Still, scholars continue the slow, painstaking work of translation and reconstruction. Each fragment recovered becomes another piece of an ancient puzzle. Bit by bit, we move closer to understanding a world where giants roamed the earth and angels abandoned the skies. Among all the figures who passed through the strange terrain of the Book of Giants, none stands taller than Enoch. Not in stature. He was a humble man, not a towering one. But in spirit, wisdom, and purpose, he was unmatched. A human being who became the crucial bridge between earth and heaven at the moment creation trembled on the brink. Genesis gives us only the briefest glimpse of this extraordinary soul. Enoch walked with God. Then he was no more, for God took him. In that single enigmatic sentence lies the seed of a story so astonishing that it gave rise to centuries of lore, mysticism, and sacred writing. The Book of Giants expands that small thread into a narrative of cosmic urgency. Born 7 generations after Adam, Enoch lived in the growing shadow of the Watcher's rebellion. While others bowed to these fallen angels or hid from their monstrous children, Enoch remained steadfast in his devotion to the Creator. He chose a different path, a path marked by integrity, solitude, and deep observation. As the world fell deeper into chaos, Enoch preserved an inner calm. His wisdom did not come from the forbidden teachings of the Watchers. It came from direct communion with the divine. Walking alone through wild landscapes, far from corrupted cities, he found himself drawing ever closer to heaven. Through disciplined prayer and meditation, his consciousness expanded beyond ordinary perception. The Book of Giants implies that where others gained knowledge through defiance, Enoch attained wisdom through faithful surrender. This divine connection continued to deepen until something remarkable occurred. Enoch began to write. Using early systems of writing, still rare in his age, he started documenting what had been revealed to him. He became the first true scribe of creation, not only recording human events, but mapping celestial structures, angelic orders, and heavenly decrees. Unlike the teachings of the Watchers, which led to vanity and ruin, Enoch's writings brought clarity and peace. He sought not to control the cosmos, but to honor its divine symmetry. His astronomical records were not tools for occult rituals. They were used to restore accurate calendars and sacred festivals in a world where time had lost its rhythm. As his insight sharpened, Enoch developed abilities that blurred the line between mortal and divine. He could interpret dreams with exact precision. His prayers traveled directly to the divine throne, requiring no mediator. Most astonishing of all, he could travel in spirit. His mind could leave his body and visit distant lands, even crossing into dimensions beyond the material realm. This made him invaluable as judgment approached. While the Watchers remained earthbound, locked in flesh, and the Nephilim were too weighed down by carnality to ascend, Enoch could move freely between planes. He became the sole messenger capable of delivering truth across cosmic divides. The Book of Giants recounts a pivotal moment. The Nephilim, disturbed by visions of doom, sought out someone who could interpret their dreams and perhaps speak on their behalf to heaven. They sent one of their own, Maha, son of the Watcher Barakel, to find Enoch. This journey became one of the central episodes of the surviving text. It was a desperate errand, an attempt by doomed creatures to understand their future and possibly change it. Maha traveled vast distances to reach Enoch, who lived far from the decayed centers of power, in a region still untouched by corruption. Their meeting was profound. The child of rebellion, face to face with the servant of righteousness. Maha, immense in stature but diminished in spirit, stood before Enoch, small in form but luminous with divine awareness. Enoch listened carefully to the giant's disturbing dreams. And then, without hesitation or fear, he delivered heaven's reply. Enoch spoke to the Nephilim with a quiet and steady authority, aware that he stood as the representative of something far greater than brute strength. He did not flinch from the truth. He confirmed what they most feared. judgment was indeed coming. A flood would sweep across the earth, washing away the corruption they had brought. There would be no mercy for beings whose very existence defied the cosmic order. In ancient texts, this role earned Enoch many titles: Witness of Judgment, Voice of Heaven, Prophet of the End. Yet in the Book of Giants, Enoch is not portrayed as vengeful. He is a truth-bearer, solemn and unwavering, who offers understanding even in the face of unavoidable ruin. His words do not gloat. They carry the final weight of divine decision, delivered with grave clarity. His pronouncement extended not only to the Nephilim but also to the Watchers themselves. When these fallen angels, desperate and ashamed, begged Enoch to plead for them, he agreed. In spirit, he ascended to the divine realms and presented their plea with honesty and deep compassion. But the answer he received from on high was unchanged. Their crimes could not be absolved. Their punishment would be eternal, binding beneath the earth, followed by a final reckoning at the end of all ages. Why was Enoch chosen to bear this staggering responsibility? The Book of Giants offers several reasons. His righteousness made him the moral counterweight to a collapsing world. His mastery of written language enabled him to accurately record divine judgments. His spiritual development allowed him to witness heavenly truths without being destroyed by their brilliance. And perhaps most importantly, Enoch embodied what humanity could have been and what it might still become after the flood had done its work. The relationship between Enoch and the giants reflects the text's deeper theological themes. For all their might, the Nephilim lacked the one thing Enoch possessed: spiritual capacity. They could crush cities, but they could not save their own souls. Their knowledge, stolen rather than given, proved powerless before divine judgment. Enoch, small and fragile in body, stood alive in spirit, and that spiritual vitality gave him greater authority than all their strength combined. As the flood drew nearer, Enoch's role shifted. He became not just a messenger, but a witness. The Book of Giants depicts him watching the events unfold, not with triumph, but with a deep, necessary sorrow. While Noah prepared an ark to preserve the bodies of life, Enoch preserved the soul of creation. He safeguarded memory and wisdom, ensuring that future generations would understand both the cause of the cleansing and the path to renewed harmony. Then comes the moment Genesis captures in a single mysterious line: "He was no more, for God took him." The Book of Giants expands this into a vision of ascension. Enoch did not die. Instead, he was transformed. His physical form shifted into something luminous, something divine. He was lifted, body and spirit, into the heavens, the first human to enter the divine realms without tasting death. Later traditions would build on this image, naming him Metatron, the celestial scribe of heaven. Though this evolution lies beyond the scope of the Book of Giants, it speaks to the lasting awe surrounding this singular man. Enoch was not like the Nephilim, half divine, half mortal, trapped between worlds. He was fully human, yet welcomed into divine presence. In a text filled with rebellion, downfall, and destruction, Enoch represents hope. He shows that there is a way forward, a possibility of transcendence through righteousness. Where angels fell and giants perished, Enoch rose. In a narrative dominated by violated boundaries and divine wrath, he reveals what happens when boundaries are crossed in obedience, not rebellion. The Book of Giants comes to us in fragments. It is not a seamless epic, but a shattered manuscript. Unlike the carefully copied biblical scrolls, it survived only in scraps, some as small as a fingernail, others containing only a phrase or a line. And yet, from these broken pieces, a profound story emerges. Its structure, what we can reconstruct, suggests a sophisticated narrative design. It was no random collection of myths. It moved between characters, time periods, and viewpoints. Some sections adopt the voice of an omniscient narrator watching from above. Others let us peer through the eyes of individual giants, Ohia, Haya, and Maha, allowing us to feel the collapse from within. What makes this text so unique is its perspective. Most ancient religious writings present judgment through the lens of the righteous or the divine. But the Book of Giants dares to show the end of the world through the eyes of those who will be destroyed. We witness their fear, their confusion, their desperate search for meaning. As troubling dreams begin to haunt them, They consult one another in growing panic. They compare visions, interpret symbols, grasping for hope. When they send Maha to seek Enoch, a brief flicker of possibility appears. But when Enoch returns with the verdict, that flicker dies. The rising floodwaters confirm what they already knew deep down: no redemption would come. This psychological depth separates the Book of Giants from simpler morality tales. Its protagonists are not painted as caricatures of evil. They are tragic figures, beings brought into existence through cosmic error, not by their own choosing. Their destruction feels both just and sorrowful. Their end is necessary, but not without pain. In fact, the text's fragmented nature amplifies its emotional weight. The missing passages invite readers to imagine the gaps. We become part of the story, assembling the pieces, as the giants themselves tried to make sense of fragmentary dreams and revelations. The broken manuscript mirrors the broken creation it depicts. A world once whole, now splintered. A harmony that has collapsed into chaos. Reading the Book of Giants becomes more than a scholarly act. It is a participatory experience. A reconstruction not just of narrative, but of meaning. Even within the preserved sections, the imagery is vivid and haunting. We read of giants so tall their heads reached into the clouds, of trees ripped from the earth like weeds, of mountains turned into thrones. We see Maha flying through vast landscapes, his wings carrying him across borders and territories. We witness dreams in which great tablets of stone descend from the heavens, marked with immutable judgment. The cosmology revealed in these fragments presents a layered universe. Earth is but one realm among many. Above lies the divine realm, composed of multiple heavens and angelic orders. Below yawns the abyss, where the watchers will be chained. Between these spaces move beings like Enoch, able to ascend while still alive, and angels who descended but can no longer return. This cosmology reflects ancient Near Eastern thought, not the rigid heavens of medieval theology. It is a world where divine and earthly realms overlap, touch, and blur. Mountains serve as bridges to the heavens. Dreams serve as portals, and the rare human soul can travel across dimensions. This thin boundary between worlds enables the Watcher's fall, but it also allows for divine response. The Book of Giants stands apart from canonical scripture in striking ways. It gives voice to those who are fallen, not only the faithful. It engages with moral complexity, portraying divine justice as sorrowful necessity, not mindless wrath. It draws from multiple mythologies, showing how early Jewish thinkers interacted with the cultures around them. And above all, it shows us divine judgment not as arbitrary destruction, but as a painful restoration of order. The Watchers taught forbidden secrets. The giants consumed the world beyond repair, and hybrid creatures defiled the natural balance. In the end, judgment becomes not vengeance, but renewal, a reckoning written in the stars and sealed in stone. The language preserved in the surviving fragments of the Book of Giants reflects its deep antiquity. Primarily written in Aramaic at Qumran, versions of the text also appear in Middle Persian, Sogdian, and other ancient tongues. The text makes use of vivid imagery and specialized expressions consistent with Second Temple Judaism. Its terminology for angels, demons, and the cosmic structure of the universe shows strong connections to other apocalyptic works from the same period, especially the Book of Enoch. Despite its fragmented state, or perhaps because of it, the Book of Giants continues to captivate both scholars and spiritual seekers. Its shattered remnants offer tantalizing glimpses into a worldview where myth and history were not yet distinct. A world where angels could literally walk among humans, where dreams served as portals to messages from realms beyond our own. The text poses timeless questions that reach far beyond its ancient setting. What happens when beings possess knowledge but lack the wisdom to wield it? What are the consequences when sacred boundaries are transgressed? Can those born from violation ever escape the shadow of their origins? These themes resonate across millennia, echoing modern anxieties about technological overreach, environmental collapse, and the moral burden of power. In its damaged state, the Book of Giants reminds us that some of the most haunting stories are those we receive in pieces. Like a ruined city partly unearthed, or a symphony missing entire movements, its fragments demand our imagination. They invite us to lean in, to reconstruct, and to search for meaning in what remains. They remind us that even broken narratives can contain truths too powerful to be forgotten. As the dreams of the giants grew more disturbing and their dread intensified, their fathers, the fallen watchers, were gripped by their own rising fear. Once celestial beings who had forsaken the courts of heaven for fleeting earthly pleasures, they now began to comprehend the depth of what they had lost. The Book of Giants captures this growing terror in vivid detail. Unlike their children, the Watchers fully understood the enormity of their rebellion and the scale of what awaited them. They gathered in hidden councils, far from both human and giant settlements. In mountain caves and isolated valleys, they convened in secret to discuss their worsening condition. Their once voluntary physical forms had become traps. What they once wore proudly now bound them to decay and regret. Their divine knowledge, once the source of their pride, now revealed the scope of the disaster they had unleashed. And they knew it could not be undone. More troubling still were the changes occurring in the natural world. With their cosmic awareness, the Watchers perceived subtle signs invisible to ordinary mortals. Shifts in the heavens, strange alignments of stars, odd migratory patterns among animals, the growth of plants behaving differently than before. Creation itself seemed to recoil from their presence, as if the world were pulling away, like healthy skin retreating from infection. Their leader, Samayaza, the first to propose dissent, called for desperate measures. He urged them to consider drastic options. Perhaps if they pooled their remaining powers, they could ascend once more and plead for mercy. Perhaps if they retracted their teachings and took forbidden knowledge back from humanity, judgment might be delayed. Perhaps, in the gravest option of all, if they destroyed their own offspring, heaven might show compassion. But deep in their hearts, they knew such efforts were futile. The Book of Giants records that in the end, the Watchers turned to the one being who still walked with God, Enoch. They sent word to him, imploring him to act as their intercessor. Their messages were desperate, blending real remorse with a hunger for self-preservation. They confessed their sins while begging to escape the consequences. Enoch agreed, not because he sympathized, but because obedience demanded it. The text tells of his ascent to the heavenly court, carrying their plea like a scroll held in trembling hands. Before the blinding radiance of divine judgment, Enoch read aloud every word. He added nothing, omitted nothing, and then he waited in silence for the response. The answer, when it came, was final and unyielding. The Watchers had crossed a boundary that could never be restored. They had mixed the knowledge of heaven with physical form and mortal lust. The result was a rupture in cosmic balance too dangerous to leave unchecked. They would be bound beneath the earth until the final judgment. And after that, eternal fire awaited. There would be no return to the glory they once knew. No seat among the stars. Enoch descended from heaven bearing the judgment carved in stone. He returned to where the Watchers waited, still holding onto flickering hope. They gathered to hear the sentence. Eyes that once reflected the brightness of the divine dimmed with dread. As Enoch spoke the words of the decree, that light vanished entirely. The proud celestial rebels collapsed to the dust in silence, their cries echoing through the mountains. Then came the execution of divine justice. A cosmic event, a celestial reckoning. The Book of Giants describes 4 archangels descending from heaven. Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, Uriel, each carried chains, not of metal, but of essence, bindings forged from divine will, capable of restraining spirit as well as form. Michael, mightiest of heaven's warriors, was first. He subdued those Watchers who dared resist. With his flaming sword, he severed their final ties to the heavens. Gabriel prepared the place of their imprisonment, a colossal chasm, hidden deep beneath desert sands, far from where humans would ever walk. Raphael bound their physical forms, stripping them of the power to shift shape or escape their earthly bondage. Uriel sealed their prison, engraving signs no force in creation could ever break. The Watchers were marched in solemn procession to their underground tomb. Each punishment mirrored the sin it answered. Those who taught astronomy were buried where they could no longer see the stars. Those who revealed the healing power of herbs were entombed far from anything that grew. Those who taught the secrets of precious stones were cast into lightless depths where no gem would ever gleam. It was judgment with dreadful symmetry. And yet, perhaps the worst of all punishments was what they were forced to leave behind. The Book of Giants suggests that, despite their rebellion, many watchers loved their children. They had bonded with their monstrous offspring in ways even they had not anticipated. Now, chained beneath the world, they could only listen helplessly. Above them, storms gathered, waters rose, and their children screamed. Samaya's final moment is described in a harrowing scene. He stood at the edge of the abyss that would become his prison. From there, he could see the distant mountains where his sons still roamed, unaware of what was coming. He glimpsed the cities where humans continued to spread the knowledge he had once taught. Then the darkness closed around him, and he was gone. But even in chains, the Watchers remained conscious. This too was part of the judgment. They would not be destroyed outright. They would endure, aware, awake, through the long turning of ages. They would feel the death of each of their sons as the flood swallowed the mountains. They would sense the gradual fading of their presence from human memory was, for the Watchers, part of the punishment. They experienced the relentless passage of time with painful clarity, counting years, centuries, and millennia in utter darkness. Yet their influence didn't vanish entirely. The Book of Giants hints that something of the Watchers lingered in the world above, echoes of their forbidden teachings preserved in ancient manuscripts, murmurs of their names uttered in hidden rituals, fragments of their knowledge embedded in myths and symbols. Though their bodies were imprisoned, the legacy of their rebellion continued to ripple outward through the very knowledge they had once unleashed. Even more urgent, their confinement failed to address the most pressing danger, their offspring. The giants still roamed above, growing more frantic with each passing day, sensing divine wrath looming like thunderclouds. Without their father's guidance, they turned inward, seeking answers in dreams. And once again, they turned to the one human who might interpret those dreams, Enoch, the prophet who walked between worlds. This dual descent, fathers below in chains, children above facing annihilation, formed the emotional core of the Book of Giants. Beneath the earth, the Watchers who had chosen mortality now faced eternal confinement. Above, their children, born from cosmic violation, stood at the brink of obliteration. Both reached for deliverance that remained out of reach. Both turned to Enoch, not as a savior, but as a witness to truth. He offered no rescue, only clarity. The separation of fathers and sons deepened the tragedy. The Watchers, trapped beneath the earth, could feel their children's rising terror but could not respond. The giants, facing doom, cried out to fathers who could no longer hear. Divine justice had severed what unholy union had bound, ensuring that the consequences of rebellion would be suffered in absolute solitude. This image, the chained Watchers buried in darkness, would echo throughout later religious traditions. Early Christian writings referenced angels confined in eternal chains. Medieval demonology built upon the motif, imagining fallen angels imprisoned beneath the world. The Book of Giants gives us one of the earliest and most detailed portraits of this theme. These celestial beings weren't bound by iron, but by decree, restrained by forces of divine will and cosmic balance. Their sentence was precisely tailored to fit their crime. As the Watchers languished in their prison, the stage was set for the final chapter of this cosmic tragedy. Their giant children, abandoned and increasingly desperate, turned once again to Enoch for answers. In their fear, expressed through dreams and visions, they revealed that even the mightiest are powerless before the will of creation, and that when the world cries out for cleansing, not even giants can stand. Among these giants, one name emerges with striking clarity: Maha, son of the Watcher Barakel. Unlike many of his brethren who gloried in brute force, Maha possessed different gifts. He could fly across vast distances with tremendous wings, and he remembered his dreams with uncanny precision. These talents placed him at the heart of one of the Book of Giants' most haunting episodes. As divine judgment neared, the giants were plagued by visions. In their sleep, they saw gardens withering, colossal trees being ripped from the soil, and endless floods swallowing mountain peaks. These dreams rattled them. Their usual arrogance faded, replaced by creeping unease. Though they ruled the physical world, they found themselves paralyzed before these dream messages, whispers of doom that felt far too real. Two giants, in particular, were especially shaken, Ohia and Haya, the sons of Samiaza. Ohia dreamed of a great tablet descending from the sky, covered in writing he couldn't decipher. It felt like a judgment, unspoken yet final. Haya envisioned a magnificent garden filled with countless trees, which were torn apart by angels wielding flaming swords. Both awoke in dread, convinced they had seen the future. A council of giants convened to make sense of these omens. Some mocked them as harmless phantoms. Others insisted they fight harder, blaming guilt for their nightmares. A few even proposed ritual sacrifices, hoping to appease the forces behind these dreams. But Maha suggested a different course. They should seek interpretation, not from their own ranks, but from Enoch, the human who truly understood divine matters. His idea was controversial. Some giants viewed asking a human for help as beneath them. Others feared what Enoch might say. Some proposed capturing him, forcing him to reveal his knowledge. But Maha insisted that only respectful inquiry would yield truth, and that only truth, however painful, could help them now. Eventually, the council agreed. But there was a complication. Enoch no longer lived among the corrupted lands. He had withdrawn to a place of purity, where the original harmony of creation still lingered. The journey to reach him would span great and dangerous distances. Who among them could make such a pilgrimage? After intense debate, Maha volunteered. With his gift of flight, he alone could cross the distance and time. The Book of Giants describes his departure in vivid detail. He spreads his massive wings, whether literal or symbolic remains unclear, and launches from a high mountain peak. Beneath him unfolds a world marred by corruption. Cities where humans worship fallen angels. Forests reduced to stumps. Wastelands where mutant beasts fight for dominance. He flies for days, crossing oceans, mountains, and barren plains. Each league he covers takes him further from the world of rebellion and closer to a realm still touched by divine order. The air grows purer. The light softens. The natural world begins to sing again with quiet harmony. At last, he finds it. A humble dwelling atop a mountain, overlooking a valley untouched by ruin. He recognizes it immediately. This is where Enoch lives, the only man who never turned from the Creator. The meeting that follows is unforgettable. Maha, a towering figure of supernatural origin, bows before Enoch, a small, simple man whose spirit radiates divine wisdom. Though Enoch's physical form is unimposing, his presence overwhelms. In this encounter, it is not size that commands authority, but holiness. Maha, with deep respect, shares the visions that haunt him and his brothers. He speaks of a recurring nightmare, a tablet floating on a sea with no land, his own name etched upon it, then vanishing. He does not demand answers. He pleads for understanding. What do these dreams mean? Can they be changed? Is there any hope for those born from forbidden union? Enoch listens silently, neither flinching at the giant's size nor showing triumph at his fear. When Maha finishes, Enoch answers. He confirms what the giants feared. These dreams are true. Judgment is coming. The world will be purged by water. Everything tainted by the Watcher's influence will perish. There is no salvation for those whose very being is a violation of divine design. Surprisingly, Maha does not rage. He does not threaten. He receives the news with quiet dignity. He does not ask for escape, only to understand. Why must they be destroyed? What law have they broken, merely by existing? The text presents Maha not as a villain, but as a tragic figure, doomed not by his own actions, but by the nature of his origin. Enoch explains that creation is governed by patterns laid down from the beginning. The blending of heavenly and earthly essences created beings who fully belonged to neither realm. This fusion destabilized the foundations of the cosmos itself. The flood, then, was not merely retribution. It was a necessary restoration of order, a purging of unnatural unions so that creation might endure. Water would cleanse what had been corrupted, allowing the earth to begin anew. Before departing, Maha asks one final question. Will the giants be remembered at all after the waters recede? Or will they be wiped from memory, as though they had never walked the world? Enoch gives an answer both sobering and coldly honest. Their bodies will perish. Their bones will rest beneath the soil. But their story will live on, not as triumph, but as warning. They will become symbols of boundaries crossed, of divine patience stretched to its limit. The The return journey unfolds differently than Maha's first flight. He does not fly with determination now, but with sorrow. The landscape below no longer feels like conquered domain. It appears transient, borrowed, soon to be swallowed by the sea. Forests, mountains, rivers, once sources of pride, now seem fragile, fleeting. Even Maha's wings, once mighty, now feel futile against what looms ahead. When he arrives at the giant's gathering place, his brothers greet him with urgency. Did he find Enoch? What did the prophet say? Is there still time? Is there still hope? Maha shares everything, withholding nothing. Their fate is sealed. The flood is coming. No mountain will stand tall enough. No strength will be enough to halt the divine cleansing. Some giants respond with fury. They vow to tear down what remains of humanity in their final days. Others collapse into despair, already drowning in dreams that now plague their waking minds. But a few, Maha among them, embrace a grim acceptance. They begin to contemplate what it truly means to face the end. These beings who once imagined themselves immortal now confront their own mortality. In the final fragments that speak of Maha, he stands alone atop a mountain peak. Storm clouds roll in from all directions. Below him, his brothers rage. But Maha remains still. His mixed nature, celestial through his father, earthly by birth, gives him a unique insight. He sees both the justice of judgment and the sorrow of extinction. The dreams that once visited him in restless sleep now materialize before his eyes. The great tablet on open water becomes the flood itself, surging toward the horizon. His name, once etched upon that tablet and then erased, will indeed vanish from the book of the living. Yet in his quest for truth, in the dignity with which he faces the inevitable, Maha achieves a kind of redemption. His path stands apart from the defiance of his brethren. Through Maha's flight and return, the Book of Giants accomplishes something rare. It asks us to feel compassion for those usually cast as monsters. We glimpse the sorrow of beings born not from sin, but from a cosmic mistake. Beings who dream of their end because they sense it written into the fabric of their existence. In Maha's journey to Enoch, and in his solemn return bearing unwelcome truth, we witness a quiet kind of heroism. Not the heroism of conquest, but of understanding. The Book of Giants does something extraordinary for its time. It gives names, voices, and identities to creatures usually depicted as a faceless, threatening mass. These aren't simply giants. They are individuals, each with traits, desires, fears, and destinies. Though we only have fragments, those fragments suggest a society as structured and nuanced as any human civilization, though twisted by unnatural origins. Foremost among them are Oya and Heya, the sons of Samayaza, the leader of the Watchers. Their names may echo cries of awe or terror, oh and ah, marking their birth as a moment of cosmic disruption. As the firstborn sons of the Watchers' chief, they held a privileged position. They are portrayed as close siblings, yet opposites in nature. Oya is impulsive and warlike, while Heya is introspective and haunted. Both receive terrifying visions as judgment nears. Oya dreams of a massive tablet being dipped in water, names washing away, his own among them. Heya sees a garden, lush and vast, where every tree is uprooted by angelic gardeners, leaving behind only emptiness. These visions terrify them. They are not used to fear. They are used to causing it. Then comes Maha, the son of the Watcher Baracle. His name roughly means "who is he?" A fitting title for one caught between two identities, never fully defined by either. Unlike his physically dominant kin, Maha possesses flight and a deep awareness of dreams and signs. The text presents him almost as a shaman among giants, spiritually attuned in ways rare for his kind. Perhaps the most surprising figure of all is Gilgamesh. Yes, the same hero from Mesopotamian epic literature. He appears in the Book of Giants as one of the Nephilim. His inclusion signals a striking cultural crossover, showing how ancient Jewish writers drew from surrounding mythologies. Early audiences would have instantly recognized the name. No explanation needed. In the fragments we possess, Gilgamesh is described as a mighty giant. His dream is of a colossal tree at the center of the world, sheltering all life beneath its limbs. He watches helplessly as divine beings descend and chop it down with axes. Though creatures depend on its shade, the tree is felled. The symbolism is clear. The world that nurtured giants is about to fall. Other names flicker through the damaged text. Aram, meaning my brother is exalted, ruled lands that would one day be called Lebanon. Hobabish, said to have skin like polished stone and strength that exceeded even most giants. Assel, whose name is linked to fertility, reportedly fathered more offspring than any other of his kind. Nikolai, a cultivator of rare plants and creator of strange hybrid life forms. Female giants are less frequently mentioned, reflecting the patriarchal tone of ancient records. But one name survives, Badanash, meaning daughter of humanity. Despite her mixed bloodline, she served in a priestly role among the giants, a spiritual figure in a society racked by violence. The text hints at complex gender dynamics among giants, interactions shaped by rivalry, alliances, and shared fate. These names belong to the elite, giants remembered not as beasts, but as characters, each one a thread in the unraveling tapestry of a world doomed by divine decree. The Book of Giants reveals that a sophisticated hierarchy existed among these beings. The first-generation giants, those born directly from the union of watchers and human women, were the tallest, the most powerful, and held the highest authority. Each successive generation saw a gradual diminishment in both stature and supernatural strength, creating a tiered society where bloodline determined social rank. Centuries after the descent of the Watchers, the Earth was populated by giants of varying sizes, each claiming dominion over different regions, with the most ancient maintaining rule over their lesser kin. Their societal structure mirrored human kingdoms in many ways, but with crucial, often disturbing differences. Giant rulers constructed enormous buildings using their unnatural strength. Palaces with doorways towering 30 feet high, thrones carved directly from mountaintops, and roads wide enough to accommodate their massive strides. They developed their own writing systems to record victories and laws, created monumental art chronicling their deeds, and established rigid traditions to assert dominance over their territories. Most terrifying was their relationship with the humans under their control. Some giants used humans as laborers or domestic servants, while others treated them as livestock, breeding, herding, and consuming them. In regions ruled by giants, humans lived in constant fear. They hid in caves, retreated to mountain strongholds, and built lives far from roads to avoid being seen. Still, a few human communities entered uneasy pacts with the giants, offering tribute or services in exchange for protection from more violent clans. The Book of Giants emphasizes that these beings were not simply physical aberrations. They possessed supernatural powers inherited from their celestial fathers. Oya could summon lightning in battle. Hea mastered the healing arts and had an intuitive command over plants. Gilgamesh's strength surpassed even what his immense body promised. Maha could travel not only through space, but also through dreams, bridging the physical and spiritual realms. These powers, combined with their immense size, led many humans to view them as gods, worshipping them and performing rites in their honor, further enraging heaven. As judgment neared, the giants responded in different ways. Some, like Oya, advocated open defiance, believing their combined strength could withstand even the wrath of heaven. Others, like Hea, succumbed to despair, retreating inward as doom approached. Gilgamesh imagined grand feats of survival, proposing towers high enough to rise above the flood. Maha, in contrast, urged resignation. He argued that their fate was not simple punishment, but a cosmic necessity. These varied reactions gave the giants unexpected depth. Instead of stock villains, they became individuals, each struggling to come to terms with their own end. Through their voices, we glimpse the inner turmoil of creatures born into violation. Their destruction is necessary for the world's restoration, but the text compels us to see them not as faceless evil, but as sentient beings facing extinction. Perhaps most haunting is the notion that the giants knew something was wrong, not just morally, but existentially. Their dreams hinted at a subconscious recognition that their very existence defied the natural order. Though they commanded the land and shaped the world around them, something deep within whispered that they could not last. Like invasive species in a fragile ecosystem, they sensed the approach of a correction. The naming of these giants serves more than a narrative function. It breaks the safe distance between reader and monster. By giving them individual names and backstories, the Book of Giants forces us to confront them not as myths, but as people, with memories, emotions, and fears. Their necessary destruction becomes a sorrow, not just a sentence. The tragedy of creatures caught in a divine equation that cannot spare them. This narrative complexity elevates the Book of Giants above moral simplicity. It shows us that sometimes, in order to restore what's been broken, the universe demands a price, even from those who never chose their fate. Restoration, it tells us, can involve mercy, but also loss. And not all suffering results from guilt. In giving names to the giants, this ancient text accomplishes something strikingly modern. It disrupts black and white thinking. The line between monster and man blurs. And in that space, empathy emerges. Judgment is still required, but the story doesn't hide its cost. We are made to witness suffering through individual experience, not just divine decree. In the final known version of the text, Maha's journey continues, this time to the edges of the earth itself. As the antediluvian world dimmed and doom gathered on the horizon, the giants turned once more to their winged brother for hope. Maha, known for his speed and courage, was chosen for a task no other dared face. Unlike his kin who crushed cities beneath their feet, Maha carried within him a spark of humility. The surviving fragments describe him as able to fly, not by technology, but by a gift from his celestial lineage. The journey before him was unlike anything ever attempted. He would need to cross the final threshold, beyond the known world, into realms unseen by mortals. Enoch, the man who had walked with God, no longer dwelled in any earthly place. He had ascended. To reach him, Maha would have to pass through lands where time dissolved, through barriers between creation and eternity. He spread his wings beneath the pale morning light. The very air trembled as he lifted off. His massive form drifted upward like a mountain uprooted. For days he flew, across oceans untouched by ships, above forests uncut by men. The strain taxed even his divine endurance. Winds, breathed by angels, resisted him. Rain not yet fallen on human lands soaked his wings. On the second night, he arrived at the world's boundary. The ancient texts say the fabric of creation thinned here. The stars dangled low, as if hung by unseen threads. The moon loomed close, glowing with prophetic weight. Beyond lay paradise, the sacred realm where Enoch had been taken. A garden unspoiled by sin or death, where spring never faded. Maha crossed rivers of light that streamed upward. He passed guardians with eyes like fire who challenged his passage. He solved riddles and spoke sacred names, unlocking the gates between worlds. And as he journeyed farther, he began to change. He grew smaller, not in stature, but in spirit, humbled before increasing layers of divine presence. Finally, after what felt like lifetimes, he reached the edge of paradise. The air shimmered with colors unknown to Earth. The light did not come from any sun or moon, but from the heart of creation itself. And there, among blossoms not seen since Eden, stood Enoch, the man who walked with God. No angel, no giant, no demon dared enter this sacred ground uninvited. But Maha, carrying the last desperate hope of his people, summoned his courage and descended. The earth did not tremble beneath his feet in this place, as it did in the corrupted lands of men. Instead, Maha felt as light as thought itself, standing in awe before the ancient scribe who gazed upon him not with fear or judgment, but with a gentle and solemn pity. Their meeting marked a threshold moment, a fleeting contact between two realms, one condemned, the other sanctified. Maha, born of fallen angels, faced Enoch, the beloved of heaven. The giant knelt before the human, an act unthinkable in the world he had left behind. With a voice trembling under the weight of cosmic dread, he delivered the message from his kin, a plea for mercy, a yearning for wisdom, and a final desperate hope to escape the approaching flood. This encounter, preserved in shattered fragments retrieved from ancient caves, remains one of the most haunting episodes in the entire Book of Giants. It speaks to the liminal state of the Nephilim, neither wholly divine nor truly human, seeking answers in domains they were never meant to enter. Maha's flight was their last act of defiance or hope, reaching across the very boundaries their kind had once defiled. And as we shall see, the response he received brought no solace to the anxious giants awaiting his return. Giants in panic. Terror spread like fire across their encampments, as dreams of destruction returned night after night. The surviving fragments of the Book of Giants offer a vivid portrait of these colossal beings brought low by fear. Oya dreamed of a lush garden consumed by fire. Hea saw a stone tablet upon which the names of the giants were slowly being washed away by floodwaters. Others envisioned chains coiling around their limbs, the sun extinguished by shadow, and stars plummeting like rain. With each passing night, their visions deepened, more vivid, more horrifying. Once, they had strode the world as if gods. Now they huddled in silence, trading nightmares and whispers, like frightened children. Some clung to denial, insisting the dreams were lies and illusions. Others fell into despair, abandoning feasts and songs for silent contemplation of the end. One fragment recounts a scene both unexpected and wrenching. Gilgamesh, the mighty warrior who had once slain dragons and conquered mountains, weeping openly before his brethren. "Even the tallest among us will drown," he cried, "and none are strong enough to resist the rising sea." The fear among the giants seeped into their followers. Human cults that once bowed before them began to question. Priests who once spilled blood on altars now faced silence or rage when they sought guidance. The violent order the giants had built trembled as its gods succumbed to dread. Some giants lashed out, attempting to assert control through force. They razed villages, demanded higher tribute, and raised monuments in a frantic attempt to defy their fate. But destruction did not still their fears. Each night, the dreams returned, clearer, crueler, undeniable. Others tried to flee fate. They tunneled into mountains, carving vast caverns they believed would shield them from the flood. They built massive arks of wood and pitch, mocking the one Noah crafted under divine instruction. But their efforts, tainted by corruption, were doomed before they began. In desperation, they turned to sorcery. They invoked forbidden knowledge their fathers had brought from the heavens. They drew symbols of power on cavern walls, chanted sacred names never meant for human lips, and offered greater and greater sacrifices in a futile bid for salvation. As Maha traveled toward Enoch, the panic among his kind reached its breaking point. The fragments speak of gatherings of giants filling valleys and mountaintops, so many that the earth moaned beneath their weight. They debated escape routes, strategies, interpretations. Some argued, some fought, some wept. The human women who had borne these giants watched with a sorrow that words could not capture. Some, the texts suggest, had come to regret their unions with the Watchers. Now, in the anguish of their children, they saw the full weight of what they had brought into the world. In these moments, the giants showed something unexpected. Beyond hunger, beyond rage, they showed something like sorrow, even guilt. In one damaged passage, an unnamed giant speaks of the beauty they destroyed, of innocence they corrupted, of a world they helped unravel. It is a rare flash of self-awareness, a moment of awakening just before the lights go out. As the days passed with no word from Maha, dread thickened. Even giants who had never prayed began to cry out to heaven, unsure if they would be heard. Those who mocked human frailty now envied Noah's chance at redemption. Those who gloried in power now saw it falter. And still, the dreams came, the water rising, the darkness claiming, judgment approaching. Enoch's vision. When Maha finally stood once again before Enoch, in that realm beyond time, he found not hatred in the scribe's eyes, nor fear, but something far more difficult to face. Divine compassion laced with immutable truth. Enoch, once mortal like any man, now dwelled in unbroken communion with the eternal. His presence radiated with a purity that forced Maha to shield his eyes. The giant delivered his plea. He spoke of fear, of visions, of the hopelessness settling over his people. He asked if there was any path to escape the cleansing flood. When he finished, the garden held its breath. Birdsong ceased. Leaves hung still. Even the waters of paradise stilled in waiting. Then Enoch spoke, his voice gentle, yet carrying the weight of eternity. "I have seen what is to come," he said. "Heaven has shown me the purging of the earth. I have seen your fathers bound in darkness. I have seen the fate of your kind etched into the stars." Enoch closed his eyes, and around them visions unfolded, not of shadow or light, but of pure, inescapable truth. Maha saw the sky open, waters falling like curtains drawn across the world. He saw his brothers scream as the mountains vanished beneath the tide. He saw the watchers, silent and chained, witnessing the death of their children. "For 300 years, Enoch said, your fathers have wept. They have begged for mercy, but their voices echo only in the silence of judgment. They chose their path when they fell from heaven, and your fate was sealed when they took mortal wives and taught forbidden things." The visions shifted again. A world before corruption appeared. Lush gardens, peaceful beasts, harmony between heaven and earth. Then came the descent, the knowledge that scorched, the desires that consumed, the power that shattered. "Behold," Enoch said, "behold what was. Behold what now is. Behold what your kind has made. The earth groans beneath your weight. The blood of the innocent cries out. Even the animals flee your shadow." Overcome, Maha dropped to his knees. In Enoch's revelation, he saw the giants not as they saw themselves, but as heaven saw them. Not as heroes, but as violations, as wounds in the order of creation. "Is there no hope?" he whispered, broken. And Enoch's face softened. "The waters will come," Enoch said at last. "This cannot be altered. But there is a truth beyond judgment, one so vast, even I struggle to fully perceive it. Mercy runs deeper than justice. Love reaches farther than law. What this means for your kind, I cannot say. But remember, nothing that has ever existed is truly lost to the one who created all things." Though cryptic, Enoch's words would later be interpreted by some scholars as a reference to the transformation of the giant spirits after death, that perhaps their essence continued on in another form. But for Maha, standing there on the edge of paradise, the promise of a distant mystery was no comfort in the face of immediate annihilation. Then Enoch placed his hands upon 2 tablets of stone that appeared before him. Flames danced across their surface, and words of fire etched themselves into the rock. A message for the giants. A final declaration of their fate. Not merely a sentence, but a statement of truth. He handed the tablets to Maha. "Return to your brothers," Enoch instructed. "Give them these words. They cannot undo what is coming, but perhaps, in understanding, they may find something that resembles peace." As Maha prepared to leave, Enoch offered one final insight. The flood comes not from hatred, but from love. A love for creation itself, which must be cleansed in order to endure. Remember this when the waters rise. With those words burning in his memory, Maha departed the garden, the tablets heavy in his hands, yet not as heavy as the truth now weighing on his heart. The War of the Giants. Maha's return, carrying the tablets of Enoch, signaled the beginning of the end. When he read the words of judgment aloud before the gathered giants, the reaction was not unity. It was chaos. The Book of Giants describes how the once solid ranks of the Watchers' children fractured into opposing factions. Each reacted differently to the terrible revelation of their fate. Some, led by Oya, called for repentance. Though the tablets offered no path to salvation, this group believed they might meet their end with dignity, and perhaps some sliver of mercy beyond death. They ceased their slaughter of humankind, withdrew to remote wilderness, and spent their final days in solemn reflection. Others, with Gilgamesh among their champions, rejected the message entirely. They proposed a last, desperate attempt to build a wall so tall it would reach above the rising floodwaters. The fragments describe their Herculean labor: mountains uprooted, forests felled for lumber, human slaves driven until death overtook them. Their work, frantic and doomed, showed the depth of their denial. But the largest faction followed Hea, fierce and wrathful. "If we are to perish," he declared, "then we shall leave nothing behind for those who follow." This group embraced destruction as their final act. They poisoned wells, set fields ablaze, and slaughtered not only humans, but every living thing in their path. What began as philosophical disagreement soon turned into open war. Giants, once allies, turned their immense power against one another. Battles erupted that reshaped valleys, dried rivers, and shattered entire mountain ranges. One vivid passage describes Oya facing off against Hea, brother versus brother. Will you let our last days be a monument to our monstrosity? Oya asked. We were born of heaven and earth. Can we not die with both dignity and regret? Heya answered not in words, but with violence. Their clash lasted 7 days and 7 nights. Each blow split the earth. When it was over, their battle had carved a canyon so deep it filled with water, forming a lake said to bear their blood. While the giants tore each other apart, the few remaining free humans watched from hiding. In one poignant scene, an old woman tells her grandchildren, "Even monsters fear death. Even the mighty tremble before judgment." The war was not only physical. Giants unleashed the magical arts their fathers had once forbidden. Spells that could summon storms were now wielded as weapons. Rituals meant to call spirits became forces of destruction. The very knowledge that had corrupted humankind now fueled the giants' final conflict. In the middle of this chaos, a smaller group gathered around Maha. Moved by his account of Enoch's compassion, they refused to join in the violence. They sought a third path, not destruction nor denial. Instead, they gathered the sacred knowledge the Watchers had passed down. They believed that even if they themselves perished, something of their story might endure. The war among the giants weakened them all. Had they remained united, they might have resisted longer, perhaps even found ways to survive. But their pride, their rage, their refusal to face truth had doomed them. Some believed this was part of the divine plan, that the giants, by turning on each other, accomplished what the Watchers could not, their own undoing. As the final days approached, and the signs of the coming deluge multiplied, the violence slowly faded. Rage gave way to exhaustion. Giants once enemies now sat beside each other on mountaintops, staring at the darkening sky. Former comrades drifted apart, each seeking their own way to face the end. By the time the first raindrops fell, their numbers had been decimated. Many lay dead in the plains and valleys, their colossal bodies becoming part of the ruined landscape. Others, too wounded to move, waited for the waters in silence. The survivors, broken, scattered, and spent, no longer posed any threat to creation. And so, without knowing it, the giants had taken part in their own defeat. Their war had done what divine decree alone could not. It had brought them to humility. As the skies split open and the heavens poured out, the remaining giants looked upward, not just with terror, but with something else: understanding. Hybrid mythologies. The Book of Giants stands as a unique crossroad in ancient literature. Its pages interlace Jewish traditions, Mesopotamian myths, and the later beliefs of Manichaean theology, a tapestry woven with familiar names and unfamiliar roles. Perhaps most striking of all is the presence of Gilgamesh, the storied Sumerian king, reimagined here as one of the mighty Nephilim. The ancient authors who created these texts lived in a world where cultural borders were porous. They borrowed freely from the stories of their neighbors, not to dilute truth, but to find it echoed in many voices. To them, myths were not separate narratives, but multiple glimpses of a singular, deeper mystery. And thus, Gilgamesh enters. The narrative presents him not as the fearless hero of ancient epics seeking immortality, but as a colossal being standing on the edge of inevitable extinction. His past quests for eternal life now carry an eerie resonance, cast against the looming reality of a world-ending flood. In this reimagined context, Utnapishtim, the Mesopotamian sage who once granted Gilgamesh wisdom on mortality, is replaced by Enoch, the scribe of judgment. But unlike before, the wisdom Enoch offers isn't a key to survival. It's a confirmation of unavoidable doom. This blending of traditions reveals something profound about how ancient peoples understood their stories. They didn't see themselves as inventing myths, but as uncovering deeper layers of shared history. If their neighbors recounted tales of powerful beings who lived before a great deluge, surely those were the same giants referenced in their sacred scriptures. The differences were merely matters of perspective, names altered by translation, details lost or reshaped through generations of retelling. Hebrew terms like Nephilim and Watcher appear side by side with Mesopotamian names. Enoch walks the same mythic landscape as Gilgamesh. Jewish heavenly hierarchies converge with Sumerian cosmic geography. Even the flood itself echoes multiple traditions: the biblical deluge commanded by Yahweh, the Mesopotamian one ordered by Enlil, and cleansing waters mentioned in mythologies across the world. The fragments tell of giants bearing names known in many tongues. What one culture called Humbaba, another recognized as Hea. A monster in one legend might be revered as a founding ancestor in another. These overlapping identities suggest an ancient awareness that different peoples were all telling the same story through different cultural filters. This convergence of myths tells us much about the world that produced them. It was a place of constant cultural exchange, where travelers carried tales across borders, where the conquered absorbed the gods of conquerors while holding onto pieces of their own lore, where traders shared not only goods but legends in crowded markets and caravans beneath open skies. To modern eyes, the inclusion of Gilgamesh among biblical giants might seem dissonant. But to ancient audiences, such a crossover was not strange, it was expected. Their world was filled with familiar patterns seen in foreign stories, echoes that bridged languages and lands. They lived close to the sources of these stories, hearing them not as separate mythologies, but as variations on remembered truth. Later, when the Book of Giants was incorporated into Manichaean texts, another dimension emerged. Mani, the prophet of this dualistic faith, reinterpreted the giants as symbols in a cosmic battle between light and darkness. The Nephilim became images of divine light imprisoned in corrupt material form. Their destruction by water was no longer just judgment. It represented a deeper struggle between spiritual purity and physical corruption. Even after their death, their spiritual remnants continued to play a role in the universal drama. In this retelling, the Book of Giants transcended its origins. It became part of a vast spiritual framework that stretched across continents and centuries. This layered storytelling reminds us that no ancient text stands alone. Each one is a branch of older roots, a voice in a long dialogue that spans cultures. The Book of Giants does not represent a single tradition, it embodies a fusion. It preserves a conversation between civilizations, an acknowledgement that diverse peoples may be recalling the same distant events through their own lenses. Its hybrid nature doesn't weaken its power. On the contrary, it amplifies its resonance. When many cultures speak of mighty beings destroyed by divine floodwaters, they don't just share narrative tropes. They may be remembering something deeper. A collective memory, a mythic scar, etched into humanity's shared imagination. To read this text well is to read with ancient eyes. To look not for contradiction, but for convergence. To see how truth can be braided from many threads, and how wisdom can lie in the space between traditions. The inclusion of Gilgamesh among biblical giants is not an error of storytelling. It's a synthesis of truths, a reminder that the past may be more connected than we remember. The weight of falsehood, carved in defiance and presented as eternal truth, shattered instantly when placed beside the real tablets sent from heaven. Their collapse only underscored the authenticity of Enoch's message: divine, immutable, indestructible. No matter how the giants raged or schemed, they could not destroy what heaven had sealed. What became of those tablets after the flood remains a mystery shrouded in legend and veiled tradition. Some accounts suggest the tablets were retrieved by angels and taken back to the celestial realms before the deluge arrived. Others whisper that they were buried in the peak of a sacred mountain, one that would remain untouched even by the highest waters. Still others believe the tablets were transformed into constellations themselves, their judgment written across the sky in light for any who dared to see. What is certain from the surviving fragments is that these tablets marked an irreversible turning point for the giants. Once delivered, denial became a luxury they could no longer afford. Ignorance shattered in the fire of divine clarity. And with truth burning in front of them, each giant was forced to choose acceptance or rage, regret or rebellion. None could return to their former state of ignorant power. In this way, the tablets echoed the role of revelation in religious tradition across all ages. They were not mere messages to ponder, but verdicts that demanded a response. They did not simply inform, they transformed. The giants who read them became the last of their kind to stand knowingly before the cosmic order, before their place was washed from the earth. The terrible drama of the giants unfolded across the world below, but its origin, its spark, lay in the heavens above. The Book of Giants offers us fractured, yet vivid glimpses of the rebellion that began everything. The descent of the Watchers. These were no ordinary angels. They belonged to a specific order of celestial sentinels, appointed to observe humanity from afar without interfering. Their fall was not just an act of disobedience, but a devastating betrayal of purpose itself. The fragments preserve names, specific, haunting names, of the Watchers and the forbidden knowledge they shared. Shemahaza, their appointed leader, was the first to speak aloud the desire to descend. He bound his companions with an oath of terrible consequence. Azazel taught the forging of weapons and the crafting of seductive ornaments. Barakul revealed the stars and their hidden movements. Kokabel interpreted celestial signs never meant for human eyes. Armoros broke spells, and Shamsiel taught the paths of the sun. Sariel traced the moon's cycle across heaven's calendar. Each watcher brought down a gift of immense power and devastating consequence. Not one of these teachings was inherently evil, but in the wrong hands, revealed too soon, without wisdom or restraint, they corrupted rather than uplifted. The rebellion, as the text tells it, wasn't an instant fall but a slow seduction. At first, they only watched more closely than they should, but fascination grew into longing. Human beauty stirred unfamiliar desires, and longing gave birth to action. They shaped physical forms, at first to blend in, then to feel, to touch, to taste, to experience the world they were meant only to witness. What makes their story so tragic is this: their rebellion didn't spring from hatred of God. It came from enchantment with creation. They didn't flee divine presence in disgust. They drifted away in awe of something they were never meant to possess. Their sin was not arrogance alone, but misplaced love. They desired what should have been protected. They loved what they were called to observe. There are moments in the surviving text when we glimpse their transformation. The removal of garments described as radiant robes of light. The descent into flesh, a compression of divine essence into temporal shell. The pain of incarnation was immense. Yet they endured it for the thrill of embodiment. But in gaining sensation, they lost stability. Jealousy took root. Comparison and rivalry emerged. Fear and pride, once foreign to them, now burned within. They competed to please, to impress, to dominate. They were divine in form, but now human in impulse. And so they fell. The Book of Giants portrays this not as a simple fall from grace, but a cosmic unraveling. Watchers once radiant and solemn became self-declared kings. Shepherds who once guarded now took what was never theirs to take. They built a kingdom on earth, a realm of corrupted light, a mountaintop court where humans sought forbidden knowledge, where giant sons were born of mortal mothers. They gathered in imitation of heaven's councils, sharing discoveries, boasting of their women, bragging about their monstrous children. It was a parody of paradise. Some, even then, began to waver. They saw their children pillage forests and consume whole herds. They watched rivers dry, skies darken, animals flee. And they understood, too late, that knowledge without timing is not a gift. It is a curse. By the time doubt bloomed, the damage was done. Their sons roamed the world, swollen with power but empty of spirit. The harmony they once admired had been reduced to chaos at their own hands. And so the heavens responded. Michael, Raphael, Gabriel, Uriel. The names thundered across the skies, sent not in anger, but in solemn justice. Sent not only for the giants, but for their creators. The Watchers were found and bound, chained in realms between worlds. They could see the earth, but never again touch it. They could witness the doom approaching their children, but offer no help. Their punishment was not annihilation. It was awareness. To watch. Forever watch. Their very title became their prison. They had chosen to see too much. And now they would see everything, without touching anything, until the end of days. In that silence, they sent dreams. Flickers of warning, fragments of memory, dread scattered across the minds of their children. But the giants, raised in confusion, misread the signs. Until Maha journeyed and returned, it was all noise. It was all too late. At the core of the Book of Giants lies a single, searing question: what knowledge should never be known? And who decides when wisdom becomes a weapon? The knowledge imparted by the Watchers to humankind before the flood was not merely a collection of simple skills. It was transformative, world-altering technology that permanently reshaped humanity's relationship with creation itself. According to the fragments, Ozzel introduced the art of mining metals from deep within the earth, teaching humans how to forge weapons capable of war and destruction, and how to craft dazzling ornaments that awaken vanity and pride. Before this intrusion, people had lived in balance with nature, using what the land gave freely. But under Ozzel's influence, they began to extract the earth's treasures with insatiable hunger, first to adorn themselves, then to harm one another with increasingly sophisticated instruments of violence. Shamahaza, another watcher, revealed the hidden properties of roots and plants, not just for healing, but to alter consciousness, to induce visions, and to access hidden realms far beyond the bounds of normal perception. Knowledge once intended for communion with nature slowly gave way to escapism, to dependence, to the pursuit of power rather than harmony. Baricel taught humanity to observe the heavens, to track the stars and decode celestial rhythms. What began as astronomy, noble and observational, soon devolved into astrology, humans assigning their fates to the movements of distant constellations, shifting the burden of responsibility from their own choices to indifferent cosmic forces. Coco Bell introduced the reading of omens, showing how bird flight patterns, animal movements, and subtle changes in weather might signal deeper truths. But this gift quickly became superstition. People once in rhythm with the seasons now lived in fear of nature's signs, interpreting threats in every storm and doom in every shadow. Armoros, who revealed spell-breaking, unintentionally opened the door to magic itself. The protective wisdom he meant to offer became a weapon. Humanity learned not only how to bless, but how to curse, not only how to free, but how to bind, ushering in a time of secret warfare and spiritual paranoia. Communities tore themselves apart with accusations of sorcery and fear of unseen curses. Conflict once fought with blades now extended into the invisible. Perhaps most dangerous of all was the knowledge of writing. The Watchers taught humans how to record and preserve information across generations. This gift, more than any other, changed the trajectory of human existence. Knowledge, once earned slowly through experience and passed down orally, could now be hoarded, copied, and spread without wisdom. Civilization accelerated, but wisdom lagged behind. Knowledge that once took lifetimes to acquire could now be consumed in moments, without the tempering effect of suffering or discipline. What makes the Book of Giants so striking is how it presents the dawn of civilization, not as pure progress, but as an act of cosmic rebellion. The tools of culture, science, and learning didn't emerge naturally. They were forced into the world prematurely, like sacred fruit plucked before it was ripe. This knowledge was not evil in itself, but humanity was not ready for it. It was like placing a burning torch in a child's hand. The fragments include a sorrowful meditation from one unnamed watcher who laments, "We gave them fire before they learned not to burn. We gave them metal before they learned not to forge chains. We gave them stars before they learned not to lose their way." This sobering reflection forces the reader to question, what is the cost of knowledge gained too soon? The antediluvian world, as portrayed in these texts, was highly advanced, cities, science, monuments, but it was also morally hollow. They could track planets, but not govern themselves. They knew the secrets of chemistry and metallurgy, but not justice or mercy. The Watchers had delivered power without character, ability without humility. The flood, then, appears not just as retribution for sin, but as a divine correction, a reset of a system out of balance. The waters came to wash away the reckless acceleration, to give the world another chance to grow slowly, wisely, in harmony. In some versions of the fragments, Noah is portrayed as more than a builder of the ark. He is a custodian of chosen knowledge. He is guided to preserve what humanity was now ready to hold, while letting the more dangerous secrets perish beneath the waters. This careful selection allowed the post-flood world to unfold more gently, with technology aligned, at least for a time, with moral and spiritual maturity. Thus, the Book of Giants presents knowledge not as inherently good or evil, but as something powerful and volatile, demanding reverence and restraint. The same theme echoes through later religious stories: the fruit from the tree in Eden, Prometheus stealing fire from the gods, the Tower of Babel. In all these tales, the warning is clear: capability without conscience leads to collapse. What's perhaps most provocative in the text is the idea that this knowledge was always destined for humanity, eventually, but not all at once, not without instruction, not without divine guidance. The true sin of the Watchers was not the content of their gifts, but the timing and spirit in which they were given. They bypassed the slow, careful process of human growth, offering shortcuts with devastating consequences. In that light, the flood wasn't just punishment. It was protection, a safeguard to ensure that future human development might be grounded in wisdom and reverence, not just technical power. The giants, born of unnatural unions and unearned knowledge, became the warning of what happens when boundaries are shattered too early, when creation runs ahead of its moral compass. Their extinction was the clearing of a corrupted path, making space for a more patient unfolding of human destiny. Too often forgotten in this great drama are the human women, the mothers of the Nephilim. Their role, though often left unnamed in the fragments, is essential and deeply haunting. These women stood at the fault line between heaven and earth. Their wombs became the threshold where cosmic order unraveled. The fragments offer only passing glances at their stories, but each one suggests a storm of complicated emotion: fear, desire, awe, and suffering. The Watchers first saw these women from afar, gazing down from their stations in the heavens. Their attraction wasn't to divine perfection, but to something raw, vital, earthly, a beauty unknown in celestial realms. Fascination turned to longing. Longing turned to action. The texts say the Watchers chose certain women, some for beauty, others for strength, others for something ineffable only angelic eyes could see. Some accounts suggest the women were willing, flattered by the attention of powerful beings. Others imply force, coercion masked as affection, consent impossible in the face of overwhelming supernatural power. The truth, as always, lies somewhere between. Some of these women may have embraced their role, others endured it as victims. But all of them bore the unimaginable burden of carrying beings not meant for this world. The pregnancies, according to the fragments, were long and agonizing. The growing children drained their mothers of strength, demanding far more than the human body could endure. Many of these women died giving birth. Those who survived faced a different torment: raising children who grew too fast, became too strong, and ultimately slipped beyond their grasp. One surviving passage tells of a woman who watches her giant son from the shadows, too afraid to speak, too full of sorrow to stay away. She sees him uprooting trees as if they were twigs, his strength unmatched, his voice thundering across the valley, and she knows he is no longer her child. He is something else, something she cannot reach. The ground did not tremble beneath him here as it did in the corrupted lands of men. Instead, he stood weightless, like thought made flesh, before the ancient scribe, Enoch, who gazed upon him not with dread or revulsion, but with a sorrowful tenderness. In that moment, two realms touched: the world of the fallen and the domain of the preserved. Maha, son of Watchers, bowed low before Enoch, the beloved of heaven. A gesture once unthinkable in the world below became, here, an act of truth. With a voice stripped of pride, trembling with the desperation of his kin, Maha delivered the message carried across realms: a plea for wisdom, a cry for mercy, a last hope for some escape from the judgment that loomed ever closer. This haunting journey, preserved only in fragments rescued from ancient caves, stands among the most poignant moments in the entire Book of Giants. It speaks to the liminality of the Nephilim themselves, beings not wholly divine, not fully human, reaching into spaces that never welcomed them, grasping for answers in a cosmos they had already fractured. But as we soon discover, the answer Maha received brought no comfort. Terror gripped the giant encampments. Panic spread like wildfire among the mighty as night after night, dreams of annihilation came without cease. The fragments paint vivid scenes of giants once worshipped as gods now shivering before visions that shattered even their colossal pride. Ohia dreamed of lush gardens consumed by fire. Haya saw a great stone tablet descending from the heavens, the names of giants washed away by cleansing waters. Others saw themselves shackled in chains, bound by forces they could neither name nor resist. while darkness swallowed the sun and stars fell like burning hail. With each night, their confidence withered and their terror deepened. Some mocked the dreams as illusions. Others stopped feasting, stopped warring, falling into silence and dread. Even Gilgamesh, that warrior who had once faced dragons and climbed forbidden peaks, was seen weeping before his brothers. "If even the tallest of us will drown," he said, "then what strength remains that could hold back the waters?" The fear among the giants infected their followers. Human cults that had praised and served them now saw their idols crumble into silence and rage. The great order they had built, cruel, unholy, but powerful, began to splinter as fear bled through the cracks. Some giants lashed out, attacking human towns with renewed fury, building colossal monuments to their fading glory and demanding ever more blood from their worshippers. But no act of destruction soothed their fear, for the dreams returned stronger with every dusk. Others chose to flee, not from justice, but from doom. They dug into mountains, hollowing out the stone, creating chambers deep underground to wait out the flood. They built vast vessels from wood and pitch, crude imitations of Noah's Ark, born of desperation, not instruction. Still others turned to forbidden arts. They drew the symbols their fathers had once taught, uttered names man was never meant to speak, and sacrificed ever more precious things in a futile attempt to control the skies. As Maha crossed the boundary between worlds to find Enoch, his people stood on the brink. Valleys and mountaintops filled with giants, too many for the land to bear. They argued, cursed, prayed, and fought. Some debated salvation, others fought like beasts, and the mothers of these beings, women of earth, washed with a kind of sacred grief. These women, once chosen or claimed by the Watchers, now saw the full scope of what they had birthed. The fragments speak of mothers who formed hidden circles, teaching one another how to survive the births of children too large, too powerful, too unnatural. They became healers and midwives, driven by necessity and fear. Some abandoned their partners when the truth became unbearable. Others used the knowledge their Watchers gave them to shield human villages from the destruction their sons would bring. A few lived far longer than ordinary humans, outlasting generations, trapped in the ache of watching their offspring remain young while humanity passed them by. For them, time was not a gift but a curse, a slow witnessing of the world's unraveling, seeded by their wombs. Most tragic are the fragments describing mothers who never ceased to love the monsters they had birthed. They brought food to giants who barely recognized them. They treated wounds on bodies that had caused others countless deaths. They sang lullabies to creatures long past childhood, holding to a thread of love even as the bond frayed into silence. As signs of judgment multiplied, these women faced the most excruciating choice. Some tried to warn their sons, only to be mocked. Others fled, unable to live in a world poisoned by what they had helped create. One fragment describes a woman climbing a mountaintop, raising her voice to heaven. "I did not know what I invited into my body. I did not see the terror behind the beauty. Let judgment come, but no, some of us would undo it if we could." In these words we glimpse something ancient and painfully human. Regret that sees clearly, love that refuses to vanish even when faced with destruction. The women of Earth, often relegated to shadows in these tales, are revealed here as the story's most morally complex figures. They were neither wholly guilty like the Watchers, nor entirely innocent like unknowing humans. They loved what they should have feared. They nurtured what would ruin them. They carried in their bodies the very fracture between heaven and earth. Though the text speaks little of them, what fragments remain shine with piercing clarity. Through their eyes, we glimpse not just the physical pain of birthing giants, but the emotional toll of raising them, of watching something you made destroy everything you hoped to protect. And when the flood came, as it inevitably did, they were claimed by the same waters that swept away their sons. Yet their voices echo still, preserved in these broken texts. They show us a love stronger than denial and a wisdom that knew, too late, that some endings are necessary. Beyond the violence of giants against man, the Book of Giants describes a deeper wound, the corruption of nature itself. Not content with breaking moral laws, the giants began to twist the laws of biology. With instincts inherited from angelic fathers, but no reverence for the Creator's boundaries, they took creation into their own hands. They captured animals of every kind, crossbreeding them in grotesque experiments. These unnatural beasts bore traits from different creatures: strength, sight, hunger, combined into things never meant to exist. Some died in agony. Others survived and thrived, becoming horrors that stalked the land beyond nature's design. The giants moved on to plants, grafting toxic species to fruit-bearing ones, creating food that poisoned those who trusted its appearance. They bred vines that strangled forests, roots that cracked cities, growth so aggressive it tore the earth apart. But the worst came when they turned to humans. The texts suggest rituals where human and animal essences were fused, flesh and spirit mingled in forbidden ways. These hybrids, neither beast nor man, became lost things, wandering the edges of existence, unable to die yet never truly alive. All of this, the mutilated animals, the haunted forests, the polluted rivers, was part of one truth. The giants had tried to remake creation in their own broken image. But in doing so, they revealed not godlike mastery, but godless ignorance. Power without reverence. Experiment without empathy. Knowledge wielded like a weapon. The ecosystems of the world collapsed under the pressure. Birds vanished from forests. Rivers choked with the waste of monstrous bodies. Predators no longer fit into food chains, only into nightmares. One fragment tells of a forest so silent it felt cursed. No birdsong, no animals, just the sound of wind scraping over poisoned bark. Another speaks of rivers that frothed and fumed, unable to cleanse themselves of the toxins introduced by these new, unnatural creatures. Creation, once ordered and harmonious, now reeled under weight it was never meant to bear. And through it all, the giants watched their chaos grow, mistaking distortion for dominion, never realizing that what they'd unleashed was their own undoing. The giants corrupted creation not only through physical violence, but through a more insidious form of spiritual pollution. The text describes strange rituals in which animals were sacrificed in ways that released dark, destabilizing energies, ceremonies that twisted the natural harmony of sacred spaces. Mountains that had once supported thriving ecosystems grew barren, as certain plants refused to grow near their dwellings. Springs that had flowed clear for centuries either turned bitter or dried up entirely in their presence. This deepening defilement reached its height in what the fragments call the mixing of all boundaries. Giants began to wear garments stitched from incompatible sources, furs of predator and prey woven together, feathers from birds that would never naturally flock as one. Their dwellings fused materials that warred against each other in form and resonance. Stone forced upon metal would bound unnaturally into places it resisted. Even their meals became sacrilegious imitations of order, mixing the flesh of herbivores with predators, consuming the sacred and profane alike with no regard for the lines nature had drawn. These might seem like small trespasses next to the slaughter of human beings, but in the cosmology of the Book of Giants, they were just as grave. For to violate the principles of creation was to declare war not only on humanity, but on the divine harmony that held all life in balance. Their transgressions were a continuation of the Watchers' original rebellion, not merely acts of lust or pride, but a willful crossing of the most sacred divide, the boundary between heaven and earth. Tragically, their violations weren't rooted in ignorance, but in a twisted echo of divine creativity. Inheriting fragments of their father's celestial knowledge, the giants understood how living systems functioned, but not why they mattered. Their innovations, lacking reverence, turned into desecration. They could manipulate life, but not honor it. They could create, but only in ways that unmade. As judgment drew closer, even the earth began to rise against them. Soil withered beneath their massive feet. Water recoiled at their touch. The very elements, once passive in their dominion, began rejecting the presence of those who had warped the purpose of their design. This physical rebellion of the world mirrored its deeper spiritual revolt. The rising flood was not just divine punishment, it was creation's cry for restoration. The cleansing waters would not only drown evil, but heal the deep wounds etched into the fabric of life. In this light, the flood takes on new meaning. not as wrath, but as medicine. And Noah's Ark, more than a lifeboat, becomes a vault of purity. Each species paired and preserved, male and female, clean and unclean, according to their kind. Every pairing a reaffirmation of divine structure. Each division a refusal of the chaos the giants had tried to merge. Noah's task was not just survival, it was repair. A curated conservation, guided by heaven, to preserve the pattern of creation untarnished. The Book of Giants, in this context, becomes a meditation on boundaries, biological, spiritual, moral, and its concerns feel shockingly modern. What limits should govern our manipulation of life? What do we lose when we blur the lines nature has drawn? The giants saw no such lines. Their corruption of creation was not just curiosity, it was contempt. They saw the world not as something to protect, but something to possess and reshape. Their efforts mirrored their fall: power without humility, transformation without wisdom. By the final days, the earth bore their scars. Forests stood silent, emptied of birdsong. Rivers flowed foul with waste from creatures bred in unnatural ways. The air itself seemed tainted by their presence. Creation, once a garden of harmonious interdependence, now groaned under the weight of their corruption. And then, the cry rose from the world. It wasn't only from the mouths of prophets or priests, but from the people, the ordinary ones, crushed beneath the giants' feet. Villages shattered, fields stolen, families torn apart. Night after night, the prayers of suffering souls rose like smoke, rising past clouds, past stars, past even the gates of heaven. Mothers wept for lost children. Elders whispered memories of gentler times. Farmers knelt over ruined soil, hands open not in surrender, but in aching plea. How long, they asked. How much longer must we endure? The heavens stirred. That cry, raw, desperate, unfiltered, pierced the veil between worlds. It reached the throne not as a polished hymn, but as a jagged spear of truth. The angels gathered. In great halls of light, voices rumbled like thunder over distant seas. Reports came from the watchers still loyal to their charge. Accounts of innocence devoured, of sacred knowledge twisted into tools of control. The cries of children, the screams of animals, the silence of forests, all of it laid before the divine. And in corners of heaven where memory still lingered, some angels whispered about their fallen brethren. The watchers, who once walked among them, now sealed beneath the earth. What if they had not rebelled? How different might the story have been? But speculation gave way to clarity. Heaven would no longer remain silent. A decision was formed, not in haste or fury, but in that stillness where eternal justice awakens. Mercy and judgment found balance. Light gathered, power stirred, the scales tipped, and the flood began to rise. The response to humanity's cry had already begun to stir. In a modest dwelling, tucked away from the realms ravaged by giants, lived a man named Enoch. His beard had grown silver with age and wisdom, his eyes still bright with clarity and vision. While most of the world trembled in hiding, Enoch walked a path few dared. He conversed with God as naturally as a child speaks to a parent. One night, as he lay in sleep, his chamber filled with a light, not sharp like midday sun, but soft like the breath of dawn. Two figures appeared beside his bed, their forms shimmering, shifting between the shape of men and something far more radiant. They stretched out their hands, luminous and woven with starlight. "Come," they said simply. Enoch felt no fear. Rising from his bed, his body seemed weightless, unburdened by gravity or flesh. The two angels, for that is what they were, stood on either side. Together they passed through the walls of his home as if they were mist, ascending above the trees, beyond the clouds. Below them, the world shrank until it looked like scattered patches of color. The stars grew vast, no longer distant sparks, but glowing orbs of song and power. They passed through layers of reality words cannot fully describe. The first heaven opened before them like a garden tended by beings of light who managed the harmony of existence. They nodded at Enoch in acknowledgement as he passed. In the second heaven, he glimpsed the watchers, those fallen angels, chained in gloom, their once beautiful forms now twisted by remorse. They called out to him, pleading for intercession. His heart ached, but the angels urged him forward. In the third heaven, Paradise bloomed beyond imagination. Trees bore fruit that shone like suns, rivers flowed with crystal light, and flowers harmonized in melodies. This, his guides told him, was the reward awaiting those who remained faithful. Through the fourth and fifth heavens he journeyed, realms of the stars, the storehouses of snow and fire, cosmic mechanisms designed for the final days. In the sixth, legions of angelic warriors stood in formation. Their weapons were not forged from steel, but from divine will. They stood ready, not out of hatred, but in defense of the order that the earth had forsaken. Then the seventh heaven opened. Here, language ends. Enoch stood before the Ancient of Days, not a form, but a presence, not a face, but a truth, a force so radiant, so holy, that it could not be seen and yet filled all things. Enoch fell to his knees, but felt himself lifted. He trembled, but also found perfect peace. In silence, understanding flowed deeper than words. He was not merely taught, he was transformed. Like water filling a vessel, divine knowledge rushed into him. He saw the beginning of all creation and glimpsed what was to come. He understood the great design, the mercy that guides it, the justice that anchors it. The angels called him by a new name, Metatron, a name of awe, of mystery, of deep meaning. Though he remained human, something in him had shifted forever. Most importantly, he was given a vision of what must come. The Watchers would be judged, the giants would fall, and the flood would wash the earth clean. Not as wrath, but as healing, as amputation saves a life. When Enoch returned to earth, he did not return the same. Those who saw him later would speak of the glow that radiated from within, how stars seemed to flicker in his eyes, how his words carried truths that settled in the bones. He had become a bridge between worlds, a messenger with the burden of revelation. And he returned carrying heaven's decree, the great accusation. In heaven's highest court, all things came to light. Not a building of stone and pillars, but a realm woven from light and eternal order. Angels stood in endless ranks, wings folded in solemn reverence, eyes turned toward the center where judgment was to be rendered. The accusation against the Watchers and their children came not as a whisper, but as a voice of thunder shaped in truth. Each charge sounded clearly, not with fury, but with a steady force that left no room for denial. They have spilled innocent blood. Visions burst into the court, villages aflame, children crying, crimson soaking the fields. They have taught the forbidden. More visions, weapons born of divine secrets, poisons crafted from sacred roots, stars twisted into tools of dominion. They have abandoned their purpose. The Watchers shone taking human wives, creating monstrous children. They have corrupted creation, twisted animals, broken boundaries, nature contorted into horror. Each word echoed like a tolling bell. Gabriel stepped forth, his presence vast and bright. I have walked among them, he said. I have heard the cries that never cease. Raphael followed, voice soft with sorrow. The world is wounded. The earth groans beneath their weight. Then came Michael, towering, resolute. If left unchecked, nothing will remain. They destroy blindly, without restraint. Uriel, keeper of wisdom, lifted his hands. A small flame flickered, revealing visions of futures twisted by unchecked ruin. See what will be, he said, if nothing is done. Then a voice spoke, not loud, but total. It filled all spaces at once. I have seen, I have heard, I have weighed. The judgment was not announced. It became known. The Watchers would be bound. The giants would fall. The flood would cleanse. But before the waters came, messengers would be sent. The archangels bowed. Each took their charge, to bind the fallen, to heal the earth, to preserve what must survive. Even in justice, a sadness lingered, a grief for what had been lost, a lament for brothers who chose corruption, a longing for a world that might have been. The accusation had been spoken, and heaven would now answer. The judgment had been delivered, and now it would be fulfilled. The four archangels, beings of radiant purpose and divine authority, made ready to descend to earth. They were no ordinary messengers, but mighty stewards of heaven's justice, each entrusted with a sacred role, each bearing a unique reflection of divine intent. Michael came first. His very presence shimmered like lightning held within form. He was the warrior of heaven, whose name asked, "Who is like God?" Though peace dwelled in his heart, his power was unmatched. He wore golden armor, armor not forged by earthly hands, but made visible through righteousness itself. His sword blazed with the fire of truth, slicing through every veil of deception. Beside him stood Gabriel, heaven's messenger, the one whose voice could either shake mountains or soothe a frightened child with the gentlest whisper. Strength of God was his name, and his words bore weight beyond sound. He would deliver heaven's decree, his voice reaching even into hidden places untouched by light. Then came Raphael, the divine healer. From his hands flowed healing like living water. God has healed, his name proclaimed. His eyes carried the kindness of a healer and the resolve of one who has seen too many wounds. He would care for the earth itself, broken by what was to unfold. Finally, Uriel completed the circle, bearer of divine fire and keeper of heavenly wisdom. God is my light, his name declared. Understanding shone from him, a clarity that seared falsehood and revealed what must be preserved before the deluge came. Together they formed the four pillars of heaven's response: strength, word, healing, and wisdom, united in divine purpose. They did not descend in human fashion from sky to earth. They passed through layers of creation, each denser and more tangled with shadow than the last. Reality parted before them like waters flowing around stones. Signs marked their arrival. Some say comets raced across the heavens. Others tell of winds singing with voices never heard before. A few spoke of shared dreams, light breaking through darkness in sleeping minds. The archangels moved unseen among humanity, assessing the depths to which corruption had spread. What they saw confirmed all that heaven already knew. The giants wandered freely, devouring all in their path. The Watchers' teachings had twisted into sinister rituals performed in secret. Fear reigned where love once had a chance to bloom. Michael sought out the Watchers hiding in their fortified peaks. Gabriel readied heaven's final message for those still willing to hear. Raphael walked through the wounded lands, sensing every scar left upon nature. Uriel found the last few humans whose hearts had not yet turned, especially one family destined for deliverance. Each archangel moved with perfect intent. They neither rushed nor delayed. They were as sure and measured as the turning of seasons, unstoppable, necessary. And when they chose to reveal their true forms, awe and terror swept across those who beheld them. They appeared not as men with wings, but as wheels of fire, many-faced wonders, voices like roaring rivers, eyes like stars set aflame. The giants, for all their might, trembled. The Watchers, for all their wisdom, cowered. Heaven had answered. It had come with 4 living torches. The day of reckoning arrived, not in thunder, but in divine clarity. Light pierced mountain fortresses like blades through silk. The Watchers, who had chosen darkness, could no longer hide. Michael stood face to face with Shemahaza, their leader, once his brother in divine service. Now, judge and accused met in silence. There were no protests. None were needed. Michael's eyes bore not hatred, but the deep sorrow of one who has watched a friend fall. You knew the boundaries, he finally said, voice steady as the stars, and you led others to cross them. Shemahaza bowed his head. No words could defend what had been done. The earth bore the evidence, the giants, the broken wisdom, the blood of innocence. One by one, the Watchers were found. Some fought, their ancient glory flickering in vain. Others surrendered, too tired to run from their failure. A few, in trembling voices, begged for mercy. They claimed love, not malice, had led them astray. Their bindings began, not with chains of iron, but with cords spun from divine will. Uriel spoke ancient words, light coiled into form and wrapped around limbs. These bindings were sealed with names older than time, names the Watchers could not resist. Raphael veiled their eyes with star-woven cloth, severing their sight from both heaven and earth. It wasn't cruelty, it was protection. Even their gaze had become a contagion. Then Gabriel pronounced their sentence. His voice thundered across valleys and mountain ranges. Until the day of great judgment, you shall be bound. Neither heaven nor earth shall hold you. You belong to the abyss. And the earth obeyed. It did not crack. It opened, revealing not rock or molten fire, but a chasm beyond understanding. A void beneath all things, a silence deeper than death. Into that abyss, the Watchers fell, not quickly, not slowly, but beyond time. Some shouted final farewells to their sons. Others wept. A few fell silent, wearing defiance like armor. Then the abyss sealed behind them. Nothing marked the place, only stillness. Michael stood over the sealed rift. He etched wards into the threshold, seals that would endure until the last day. Uriel surrounded it with watchfires, not to warm, but to warn. The watchers were gone, but their children remained, and the giants felt it. They felt the absence like a shroud torn away. Fathers vanished. Dreams turned cold. The distant whisper that had always lingered at the edge of consciousness went silent. And fear bloomed. A wild panic took root. They knew heaven now looked to them. The archangels, though half their work done, did not rest. They turned to what remained, effects still roaming the world long after the cause had been bound. As night fell, humanity slept more peacefully than it had in ages. No one could say why, but something had shifted. Some burden had been lifted. Above them, high beyond the clouds, for archangels gathered again, their task not yet complete. And the giants wept. They didn't weep with tears, but with groans that shook the earth. At first, they felt it only as a stillness. The familiar presence of their fathers was gone. Then dreams came, chains, darkness, the abyss. They woke in terror. By morning, they knew. Their protectors had been taken, and they were next. Oya, the largest among them, called a great gathering. In a wide valley where even their towering forms could fit, they assembled. Hundreds arrived. Each footfall resounded like thunder. Each heart beat with a fear they had never known. The ground for miles around shook with the approach of giants. Some wore armor shaped from jagged stones cut from mountain cliffs. Others brandished uprooted trees wrapped in metal bands, weapons fit for their massive hands. Yet the most striking feature upon every face was not rage or arrogance. It was fear, a look no human had ever seen in them before. "Our fathers are gone," Oya declared, his voice booming across the valley, rolling like thunder. "Taken by heaven's servants." Gasps and murmurs spread among the assembly. Some giants fell to their knees, tears flowing like rain. Others howled in denial, fists raised toward the sky. Oya's brother stepped forward, voice low but resolute. "We must prepare. Heaven's gaze is now upon us." Mahai, the reflective one who had once journeyed to speak with Enoch, looked up. "We cannot fight what bound our fathers. We must search for another path." Arguments broke out, voices booming in defiant confusion. Some called for mountain fortresses. Others proposed fleeing into the ocean's depths, where heaven's eye might not follow. A few, in desperation, suggested storming the gates of heaven itself. As discord echoed across the valley, a young giant, smallest among them but keen of spirit, pointed skyward. "The animals are leaving," she said. Few listened, but her words held truth. Birds lifted in mass flight. Wolves and deer ran side by side, forgetting predator and prey. Even insects vanished into the earth. Nature itself recognized what the giants in their turmoil could not. Judgment was near. Then Enoch appeared. At the edge of the valley, he stood, transformed by his ascent, radiant with celestial grace. Though dwarfed in size by the giants, all eyes turned to him. Light shimmered around his frame. His voice, though quiet, reached every ear. "Children of the Watchers," he said, "heaven has judged your fathers. Now, it turns its gaze upon you." Several giants charged, driven by rage, but they were stopped by an invisible force and collapsed to their knees. Some wept, though they could not say why. "What shall we do?" asked Mahai, stepping forward. "Where can we go?" Enoch's gaze softened, sorrowful but unwavering. "There is nowhere beyond heaven's reach. What was never meant to be cannot remain." The truth sank in like stone in deep water. They weren't merely children who had erred. They were contradictions, existences never written in creation's design. Punishment was not for their actions alone. Judgment had fallen upon what they were. And this broke them. Giants who once laughed at human fear now trembled. Some tore their garments and hair in mourning. Others simply collapsed into silence. Barakiel, a warrior known for his ferocity, approached Enoch with bowed head. "Is there no mercy left? No chance for redemption? What would you offer?" Enoch asked. "What life could balance your weight? What healing could undo your harm?" Barakiel had no reply. That night, the valley echoed with grief. Giants cried not just for themselves, but, finally, for what they had broken. Their tears formed rivers that ran down the slopes. Their cries shaped winds that humans would later recall in fearful dreams. By morning, some had vanished, fleeing to hidden places. Others remained, sitting in silence, waiting for what would come. The weeping of giants became the sound that ushered in the final days. Yet not all chose surrender. Among them were those born for war, whose spirits refused to yield. If heaven demanded death, they would offer resistance. Oya summoned these fighters. "We are children of heaven and earth," he thundered. "Why should we die without a fight?" Hundreds answered. Weapons were fashioned, massive clubs, boulders sharpened to blades, spears as tall as trees. Their preparations rattled the earth. Humans huddled in fear, animals climbed higher ground. The archangel Michael arrived, not cloaked, but radiant in divine form. His very armor shone with unearthly fire. At his side stood legions of angelic warriors, each fierce as storm. "Lay down your arms," Michael commanded. "Accept what must be." Oya stepped forward, club in hand. "We didn't choose birth," he growled, "but we will not surrender life." And so the battle began. Not war as mortals know, but a clash of realms. The giants fought with raw might. The angels wielded power shaped from creation itself. Mountains crumbled. Valleys split open. The air burned with divine energy. Some giants fell immediately. Others fought longer, their mixed blood granting resilience. Ha hurled lightning from his hands, stunning even angelic foes. Mahai moved with speed, striking precise, vanishing before retaliation. But for every angel they felled, 3 more came. For every tactic they mastered, new divine forces emerged. By nightfall, half the giants were gone. Not slain, but unmade. Their forms dissolved into light and dust. The survivors retreated into a sheltered valley. Wounds glowed with strange fire. "We can't win," Barakiel admitted. Some suggested burrowing into the earth. Others diving into oceans. Still others wondered if humans might hide them. Then the stars shifted. New constellations formed. Symbols in a language only the giants could read. The meaning was clear. Nowhere is beyond reach. By dawn, they had scattered. Some to fight, some to flee, some to wait in silence. But heaven would not stop. Its will would hunt them down. And even this battle would soon pale before the next judgment. For water was coming. And far away, in silence, Noah built. He worked not with anger, but obedience. He had seen enough to know this world would not last. He labored on the great vessel, alone in purpose, carrying within him the final hope of the old world. And the sky darkened. The ground for miles around shook with the approach of giants. Some wore armor shaped from jagged stones cut from mountain cliffs. Others brandished uprooted trees wrapped in metal bands, weapons fit for their massive hands. Yet the most striking feature upon every face was not rage or arrogance. It was fear, a look no human had ever seen in them before. "Our fathers are gone," Oya declared, his voice booming across the valley, rolling like thunder. "Taken by heaven's servants." Gasps and murmurs spread among the assembly. Some giants fell to their knees, tears flowing like rain. Others howled in denial, fists raised toward the sky. Oya's brother stepped forward, voice low but resolute. "We must prepare. Heaven's gaze is now upon us." Mahai, the reflective one who had once journeyed to speak with Enoch, looked up. "We cannot fight what bound our fathers. We must search for another path." Arguments broke out, voices booming in defiant confusion. Some called for mountain fortresses. Others proposed fleeing into the ocean's depths, where heaven's eye might not follow. A few, in desperation, suggested storming the gates of heaven itself. As discord echoed across the valley, a young giant, smallest among them but keen of spirit, pointed skyward. "The animals are leaving," she said. Few listened, but her words held truth. Birds lifted in mass flight. Wolves and deer ran side by side, forgetting predator and prey. Even insects vanished into the earth. Nature itself recognized what the giants in their turmoil could not. Judgment was near. Then Enoch appeared. At the edge of the valley, he stood, transformed by his ascent, radiant with celestial grace. Though dwarfed in size by the giants, all eyes turned to him. Light shimmered around his frame. His voice, though quiet, reached every ear. "Children of the Watchers," he said, Heaven has judged your fathers. Now, it turns its gaze upon you. Several giants charged, driven by rage. But they were stopped by an invisible force and collapsed to their knees. Some wept, though they could not say why. "What shall we do?" asked Mahai, stepping forward. "Where can we go?" Enoch's gaze softened, sorrowful but unwavering. There is nowhere beyond heaven's reach. What was never meant to be cannot remain. The truth sank in like stone in deep water. They weren't merely children who had erred. They were contradictions, existences never written in creation's design. Punishment was not for their actions alone. Judgment had fallen upon what they were. And this broke them. Giants who once laughed at human fear now trembled. Some tore their garments and hair in mourning. Others simply collapsed into silence. Barakiel, a warrior known for his ferocity, approached Enoch with bowed head. "Is there no mercy left? No chance for redemption? What would you offer?" Enoch asked. "What life could balance your weight? What healing could undo your harm?" Barakiel had no reply. That night, the valley echoed with grief. Giants cried not just for themselves, but, finally, for what they had broken. Their tears formed rivers that ran down the slopes. Their cries shaped winds that humans would later recall in fearful dreams. By morning, some had vanished, fleeing to hidden places. Others remained, sitting in silence, waiting for what would come. The weeping of giants became the sound that ushered in the final days. Yet not all chose surrender. Among them were those born for war, whose spirits refused to yield. If heaven demanded death, they would offer resistance. Oya summoned these fighters. "We are children of heaven and earth," he thundered. "Why should we die without a fight?" Hundreds answered. Weapons were fashioned, massive clubs, boulders sharpened to blades, spears as tall as trees. Their preparations rattled the earth. Humans huddled in fear, animals climbed higher ground. The archangel Michael arrived, not cloaked, but radiant in divine form. His very armor shone with unearthly fire. At his side stood legions of angelic warriors, each fierce as storm. "Lay down your arms," Michael commanded. "Accept what must be." Oya stepped forward, club in hand. "We didn't choose birth," he growled, "but we will not surrender life." And so the battle began. Not war as mortals know, but a clash of realms. The giants fought with raw might. The angels wielded power shaped from creation itself. Mountains crumbled. Valleys split open. The air burned with divine energy. Some giants fell immediately. Others fought longer, their mixed blood granting resilience. Ha hurled lightning from his hands, stunning even angelic foes. Mahai moved with speed, striking precise, vanishing before retaliation. But for every angel they felled, 3 more came. For every tactic they mastered, new divine forces emerged. By nightfall, half the giants were gone. Not slain, but unmade. Their forms dissolved into light and dust. The survivors retreated into a sheltered valley. Wounds glowed with strange fire. "We can't win," Barakiel admitted. Some suggested burrowing into the earth, others diving into oceans. Still others wondered if humans might hide them. Then the stars shifted. New constellations formed. Symbols in a language only the giants could read. The meaning was clear: nowhere is beyond reach. By dawn, they had scattered. Some to fight, some to flee, some to wait in silence. But heaven would not stop. It's what would hunt them down. And even this battle would soon pale before the next judgment. For water was coming. And far away, in silence, Noah built. He worked not with anger, but obedience. He had seen enough to know this world would not last. He labored on the great vessel, alone in purpose, carrying within him the final hope of the old world. And the sky darkened. The giants' reign continued, distant and dwindling, while others worshipped or cowered. Noah, ever watchful, remembered. He saw their hunger strip the land, their casual violence, their reshaping of the natural balance. But his building had started long ago, years before the angels descended or the watchers were chained. By then, his hands were already tough with labor, sealing the ark's seams with pitch. His neighbors mocked him. Madness, they jeered. A ship in dry land. Noah only replied, "The world is thirsty for justice." And he kept building. His sons joined him: Shem, faithful and solemn; Ham, loyal by blood; Japheth, moved by curiosity. Their wives gathered seed, recorded knowledge, and preserved what was worth saving. On the day the watchers were bound, Noah felt it. like a sailor reading the wind. That night, dreams seared through him, visions of chains and abyss. He told no one. When the giants fought angels, Noah worked harder. Distant rumblings, trembling ground. He knew what was coming. Uriel arrived at the final hour, not as terror, but as a traveler whose eyes held starlight. "You alone have seen clearly," Uriel said. "You alone have prepared." "Not by my wisdom," Noah replied. Uriel gave detailed instruction: when to enter, how to gather, what signs to watch. "Your family will bridge the world that ends and the world that begins." Noah asked only one question: will any giants survive? Uriel's face darkened. Their forms will dissolve, but their spirits will remain, in another time, in another war. As Uriel departed, Noah looked across the land. Giants panicked in the distance. Closer, people lived on as if nothing approached. He said nothing, only worked. With new resolve, the ark neared completion. Heaven's judgment was beginning, and the world was about to be made new. The air stilled. Birds ceased singing. The wind itself held breath. For 3 days, an unnatural calm gripped the earth. In mountain halls and ocean pits, the remaining giants felt it. They had fought and lost. They had fled and failed. Now came something beyond battle, a fate that seeped into the bones. Inside the ark, Noah's family finalized preparations. 7 pairs of the clean, 1 pair of the unclean. Each came unbidden, drawn by a silent force. Predator and prey, side by side. Seeds, scrolls, memory, all was packed away. The world's last treasures. Outside, mockers gathered. "Where is your flood, old man?" "The sky is blue." Noah turned only once. His eyes mourned but wavered not. He stepped inside. The door sealed, not by hand, but by word. From beneath the soil, waters surged. Clear springs turned black. Minerals rose like ancient breath. The sky shimmered as if made of crystal. Then it fractured. Rain fell, soft, gentle, beautiful. Children laughed, catching drops on their tongues. Adults smiled. It was the first rain. For one day, it seemed a gift. But by the second, water climbed. Streams became rivers. Homes vanished beneath the tide. By the third, terror came. The sky broke open. The earth cracked below. Waters poured from every direction. Waves devoured mountains. Giants fought the flood. Some swam, some climbed, some begged. But nothing with breath could resist. Inside the ark, the family heard the pounding rain, the lapping flood, the fading cries. They lit lamps. They whispered memories. They waited. For 40 days, it rained. For 5 months, water ruled the peaks. All breath returned to dust. Giants dissolved, but their spirits did not. Fragments remained, echoes adrift. The world was washed, but something ancient still stirred beneath the surface. The cleansed world, though seemingly empty, still held echoes of what had come before. Like invisible spores scattered across a barren field, fragments of what once was lingered in the spiritual atmosphere, waiting for new soil to receive them. The flood was not the final chapter, but a profound turning point. High above this transformed landscape, the ark floated, its wooden hull cradling the last spark of humanity, a flame of life protected against the storm. Inside, a quiet pulse of hope endured, waiting patiently for the waters to recede and the new world to rise. The former age had ended, washed clean, its clamor silenced beneath layers of water. What might take its place remained uncertain, shrouded in mist and memory. The flood was long foretold. Even before the first drop fell, it was known, not in vague legend, but in whispers, warnings, and visions etched into sacred remnants. The Book of Giants preserves fragments of this foresight. It speaks of how the coming deluge was revealed to certain souls before it became reality. Enoch, after returning from his ascent to heaven, stood before the gray giant Maha and delivered his message. His voice, calm yet unshakable, carried the weight of truth. "Waters will rise until even the highest mountains vanish beneath them," he said. "Every creature that draws breath shall return to the elements, not as punishment alone, but as a necessary cleansing." To mankind, these words meant judgment. To the giants, they struck deeper. They were not simply being punished. They were the very corruption being removed. Some scoffed at Enoch's words, dismissing them as myth. Others, sensing their gravity, sought escape. A few, wiser than the rest, accepted their fate, understanding that their existence had tilted the balance of creation too far. Heavenly tablets appeared, some entrusted to Noah, detailing how to build a vessel strong enough to survive the storm. These instructions included measurements, materials, and methods beyond mortal comprehension. Other tablets bore warnings, offered to any who could read the language of heaven. A handful of giants intercepted these glimpses of divine communication. They puzzled over glyphs they could barely understand, their massive minds trembling at the fragments they could decipher. Then came the dreams. 7 giants, in separate places, received identical visions, tidal waves drowning mountaintops, their colossal bodies dissolving like salt in boiling water, a future wiped clean of their kind. They convened in a secret valley, shaken to their cores. "Perhaps we can build our own ark," one proposed, clinging to hope and strength. "Perhaps we can make peace with heaven," said another, not grasping that the offense lay not just in deeds, but in essence. "Perhaps we should cherish what time we have left," said a third, with a rare and bitter wisdom. Signs intensified. Animals behaved strangely, migrating without pattern, grouping oddly, falling silent in seasons that once rang with mating calls. Flowers bloomed out of turn. Even the stars shifted subtly in their paths, as if writing out messages in a script only the heavens could read. One young giant, unusually sensitive to the world, noticed that water everywhere had become restless. Springs surged higher. Dew lingered unnaturally late into the day. "The world weeps ahead of time," she told her mother, who waved it away as nonsense. But it wasn't. Meanwhile, Noah continued his work. He said little, kept his focus, followed instructions given not in books, but in dreams, whispers, and visions. Neighbors laughed at him, accused him of madness. "The world is parched, not drowning," they said. But still he built. Giants watched from a distance. Some considered destroying the ark, but each time they drew near, luminous beings appeared, silent and unmoving, but radiating a presence so powerful that even the boldest giants backed away. In the depths, the watchers chained in the abyss stirred. Part of their sentence was to remain conscious, knowing that their children would be swept from creation, and they would be powerless to intervene. Their cries reached no mortal ears, yet a few giants awoke in the night weeping without understanding why. Then, the animals began to gather, not driven or coerced, but drawn by a force older than time. They arrived in pairs, groups, tribes, predator and prey walking together as if remembering a lost piece. Even chaos itself paused. The world entered a hush. 7 days before the waters surged, all things stilled. The winds vanished. Clouds hovered in place. Birds froze mid-flight, landing in eerie silence. People began to fear, not storms, but stillness. In this silence, a few humans began to question. Could the madman's ark be more than folly? Could the stories be true? Giants felt it too. A pressure under reality. Something building beneath the surface, preparing to break through. The deep waters, once locked away by the architecture of creation, stirred with ancient force. In distant mountain fortresses, giants gathered for final revelry. They drank, they sang, they recounted glories and mourned what would never be again. Some embraced doom with defiance, others with tears. On the last night, the stars flared unnaturally bright. The moon loomed close and full, as if bearing witness. Even the heavens seemed to be saying farewell. Noah and his family entered the ark, not in chaos, but with steady hearts. The door sealed behind them, not with hands, but with a word of power, older than any tongue still spoken. Then it began, not from the sky, but from the ground. Springs that had flowed since Eden now surged in fury. Water gushed up from unseen depths, turning clear pools murky, then black with ancient minerals untouched by light. Soil turned to sponge underfoot. Something irreparable had begun. The sky transformed, not with the storm clouds that human intuition might expect, but with a strange crystalline brilliance. The firmament, that great dome which ancient minds believed separated the earthly waters from the heavenly, began to unravel. The first raindrops fell like tears, gentle, warm, unfamiliar. Children caught them on their tongues, never having seen rain before. Adults looked upward in wonder, not fear. It was beautiful. For one day, The rain was soft. People sought shelter, but no panic stirred in them. Some even celebrated what felt like a long overdue blessing after years of drought brought on by the giants. But by the second day, streams turned to rivers. Water lapped into low-lying homes, soaking ankles and rising with silent urgency. Wonder gave way to concern, but most still assumed it would pass. On the third day, everything changed. The gentle rain turned violent. The firmament gave way completely, releasing water held in suspension since the world's first breath. Simultaneously, the ocean floors cracked open, vomiting ancient seas into the open air. Water surged from all directions, above, beneath, and across. It did not fall. It swallowed. Mountains once considered immovable pillars of the earth disappeared beneath rushing waves. Valleys turned to lakes, then seas. The giants, despite their might, found no defense against water. Some tried to swim, flailing limbs carved currents, but made no progress. Others crafted rafts, only to have them splinter beneath their weight. A few scaled the highest summits, only to watch helplessly as the water line crept ever upward. Humans cried out for the watchers, but the watchers could no longer hear. They made sacrifices to false gods, whispered desperate prayers to the sky, but it was too late. What had been set in motion could not be undone. Inside the ark, Noah's family listened. Rain drummed steadily against the roof. Water rushed against the sealed wooden walls. The sound of voices faded, slowly, then utterly. They lit lamps to hold back the deepening dark. They spoke quietly, sharing memories of a world already lost. Above them, in realms hidden from human sight, the archangels watched in silence as the cleansing began. This was no punishment in the way mortals imagine. It was restoration, necessary, like the cutting away of diseased flesh to preserve what still lived. For 40 days and 40 nights, rain poured from a sky that never cleared. For 5 months more, floodwaters covered even the tallest peaks. Everything that once drew breath on land returned to the elements. The giants dissolved, flesh and bone undone, melted into the earth and water that now held their memory. Their presence erased from physical creation. Yet something lingered, echoes of their being, whispers of what they had been, fragments of consciousness, like invisible spores, drifting through a cleansed world, waiting for fertile ground to take root. The flood had ended the old world, but it had not ended their story. It only turned the page. The ark remained, carried upon the sea of rebirth. Within it, the last flame of humanity flickered, alive and waiting for the waters to retreat, waiting for what might rise in the quiet that follows ruin. The giants had perished, but their spirits did not. Their death was not an end, only a shift in form. As their enormous bodies slipped beneath the flood, their spirits rose, untethered and furious. These were not ordinary souls, born of heaven and earth. The Nephilim existed outside natural boundaries. Not even the flood, the divine reset, could fully unmake them. Instead, they were transformed. They became what later generations would call demons. Enoch wrote of them, of this strange half-existence. From the days of slaughter and death of the giants, he recorded, "The spirits that have gone forth from their souls shall stand without judgment." Not fully alive, but not truly dead. Trapped in the in-between. The flood had stripped away their flesh, but not their essence. They endured, spirits of anger and appetite, born of celestial fathers but corrupted in the cradle. These were the first demons in Jewish tradition. They wander still. Old texts speak of their endless hunger, their restless violence. Though now bodiless, their thirst remains. No longer able to rule by strength, they possess, whisper, corrupt. Some rabbinic writings suggest these spirits cause illness, mental and physical. A sudden sickness without cause? A voice in the head that doesn't belong? Perhaps a Nephilim spirit is near. The Book of Giants hints at this shift. Later Jewish writings clarify it, building a bridge from the pre-flood world into the spiritual troubles of later ages. These demons were not born of Satan. They were remnants of something older, something God had tried to wash away. They are spite-made spirit. Imagine their fury. Once they ruled mountains. Now they hover in shadows. Once worshipped, now forgotten. Their grudge is ancient and unyielding. Noah's survival must have burned in them like a curse. While they drowned, he and his family floated above it all, untouched. Some say the demons still target his descendants, out of jealousy, out of vengeance. In this understanding, the problem of evil has roots in memory. God cleansed the world, but fragments remained. Shadows persisted. The final revenge of the giants was that they did not disappear. Not completely. Later mystics expanded the vision. The Zohar, central to Jewish mysticism, describes these spirits as lurking in cracks, in ruins, in places left empty and forgotten. They are drawn to thresholds, to boundaries, between places, between people, between thoughts. Their own existence is liminal, and so they find power in places like themselves. This explained much for the ancients. Why some places feel wrong. Why a person's mind can turn against itself. Why darkness lingers in a world declared good. The giants fell, but they did not fade. They watch still. They whisper still. They remember the age when they ruled. And in that memory, they endure. Some early Christian writers made the link plain. These spirits, the ones Jesus cast out in the Gospels, they weren't new. They were ancient. Their roots traced back to before the flood, before Babel, before Sinai. Their war against the order of heaven had simply changed form. A spiritual conflict, born of the Watchers, carried forward by their children, carried on in whispers through the ages. The damned spirits also help explain why, in ancient thinking, protections were necessary. Amulets, prayers, rituals. These weren't dismissed as mere superstition, but regarded as practical responses to a world still haunted by giant-born ghosts. They were safeguards, not symbols, meant to shield against ancient grudges still carried by spirits who once wore flesh. What's remarkable is how this concept of transformed giants deeply influenced later literature and folklore. Medieval tales of restless spirits and modern ghost stories all trace their roots back to this belief that some dead never find peace. The motif of the unsettled, the malevolent, the haunted, all echo those primal stories of what became of the Nephilim after the waters rose. When the flood finally withdrew and dry land returned, Noah's family stepped out onto soil still damp with divine judgment. The giants were gone. Their thunderous steps no longer shook the earth. But was the world truly free of them? The Book of Giants largely concludes at the flood's end, but other ancient writings suggest the story didn't end there. Some claim a handful of giants survived, perhaps by reaching the highest ground, or maybe through some divine oversight. Even Genesis hints at the possibility when it notes that the Nephilim appeared again after the flood. The most famous tale of survival centers on Og, king of Bashan. According to rabbinic legend, he clung to the ark itself, riding out the storm like a castaway nobody invited. The waters that drowned his kin barely reached his knees. When the Israelites faced Og centuries later, they weren't just fighting a man. They confronted a living relic of the pre-flood world. Other legends mention different survivors. One tells of Ohia escaping to a distant mountain. Another claims that some giants hid in high-altitude caves. These stories tried to bridge a troubling gap. If all giants were destroyed, why did later scripture speak of them again? Numbers 13 recounts how spies in Canaan returned terrified, saying, "We saw the Nephilim there. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes." Either some giants survived the deluge, or the forbidden unions began again. Neither answer brought comfort to ancient readers. The valley of Rephaim, the sons of Anak, Goliath of Gath. Long after Noah's time, the Old Testament landscape remained populated by towering figures. Every mention of them challenged the notion of the flood's finality, or else warned that history might once again echo its darkest refrain. Archaeological discoveries fed these tales. Ancient peoples found massive bones, what we now recognize as dinosaurs, and interpreted them as remnants of giant humans. Monumental structures like Stonehenge or Baalbek, whose scale defied ordinary explanation, were thought to be the handiwork of beings no longer among us. Who but giants, people asked, could lift such stones? Outside Jewish tradition, stories of giants abounded across the world. Greek titans, Norse Jotnar, Hindu Daityas, all depicted immense, primordial beings cast down by divine power. Were these coincidences, or cultural echoes of the same mythic memory? Flood narratives appear globally, and many involve divine punishment following rebellion by beings too powerful or corrupt. From the Mesopotamian epic of Gilgamesh to Mayan traditions, a pattern repeats. Giants sin, waters rise, and a new world is born. To ancient scholars, these similarities weren't accidental. The Dead Sea Scrolls even hint that some feared the giants might return. Writings speak of future battles against beings whose characteristics mirror the ancient Nephilim. Were these poetic warnings or real dread? By medieval times, Jewish thinkers leaned toward metaphor. Giants became symbols of pride, of rebellion, of humans pushing too far. Their story warned of the danger in overreaching, of trying to become more than what we were made to be. Christian interpretations often align giants with demons. Their presence in Canaan wasn't just a threat to Israel's safety. It symbolized spiritual pollution that had to be purged. The conquest was framed as more than war. It was a continuation of heaven's cleansing begun in the flood. Islamic tradition offers a different lens. While the Quran does not mention Nephilim by name, it speaks of ancient peoples destroyed for their sins. People said to have grown large and arrogant through corruption. Their fall served as a warning. When spiritual rot grows deep enough, it manifests in the body and brings judgment with it. What's most striking is how the giants never truly vanish. They die in water, yet rise in stories. They fall to judgment, yet reappear in dreams, in ruins, in shadows. Perhaps their persistence says something about us. We use giants to explain what we can't grasp, to embody our fear of unchecked ambition, to remind us that some boundaries are sacred. The post-flood world may have washed away the Nephilim's bodies, but their legacy lingered, as memory, as metaphor, as mythic warning. And then, something unexpected happened. The Book of Giants, once nearly forgotten, found new life in a distant land. A Persian prophet named Mani, founder of the 3rd century religion Manichaeism, unearthed the old tale and gave it new meaning. His teachings, blending Zoroastrian dualism, Buddhist thought, and Christian ideas, centered on an eternal conflict between light and darkness. The story of the giants fit perfectly. In Mani's retelling, the Watchers were radiant beings of light, now trapped in corrupt matter. The giants became tragic hybrids, part divine, part defiled. Their fall wasn't just about angelic disobedience, but about light imprisoned in flesh. Their destruction was not merely judgment, it was cosmic necessity. We know of this version through remarkable finds at Turfan, an ancient Silk Road city in what is now China. Buried beneath desert sands, fragments of the Book of Giants survived, written in Middle Persian, Sogdian, Uyghur, and Coptic. Each culture layered its own language and imagery over the tale, but the essence remained. Beings of mixed origin, seeking truth before their end. Names changed. Characters shifted. Og became Sam. Mahaway became Nariman. Some roles disappeared. Others emerged. But the core endured. A holy man, Enoch or one like him, warning doomed creatures of what lay ahead. In Manichaeism, the giants weren't mere brutes. They symbolized the deepest tragedy, light lost within matter. Their torment echoed the universe's struggle. Imagine light as conscious. Now imagine it trapped, longing to return. The giants represented too much knowing spirit tangled in too much greedy flesh. Mani's faith spread widely, from Rome to China. For centuries, his version of the Book of Giants traveled with missionaries across continents. Roman emperors, Chinese bureaucrats, Central Asian traders, all encountered its strange wisdom. Even Augustine of Hippo, before converting to Christianity, spent 9 years as a Manichaean. He likely read the Book of Giants in Persian form. Later, when he turned against Manichaeism, his criticisms helped seal Christian rejection of the text. Manichaean art gives us haunting glimpses of their vision. Giants appear beautiful but broken, faces of light contorted by sorrow. They are not monsters, but misbegotten children of heaven and earth. Their fall, tragic. Their suffering, immense. When Islam spread through Persia, Manichaeism faded, but its echoes lingered. Sufi mystics and Persian poets carried fragments of its teachings. In Islamic folklore, faint traces of the giants' legacy remain, ghosts of a story that refused to die. The pre-flood world. What's remarkable about this transmission is how a once-rejected Jewish text found unexpected life in entirely different cultural landscapes. Stories often have strange afterlives. Cast out from one tradition, they frequently find refuge in another, adapting to fit new spiritual climates while preserving their foundational bones. In the Manichaean retelling, the emphasis on dreams becomes central in a way Jewish traditions only hinted at. The giants are plagued with apocalyptic visions, dreams of trees being uprooted, representing themselves, and visions of divine fire devouring a celestial garden, signaling the flood. These symbolic visions became a focal point of the Manichaean version. Mani himself, the founder of the religion, claimed to be guided by a spiritual twin, a divine counterpart who revealed hidden truths. This figure bears striking resemblance to Enoch's role in the original Book of Giants, a mediator between realms, a dream interpreter, a herald of difficult cosmic truths. It's possible that Mani saw himself as a new Enoch, born into a later age to relay transcendent wisdom. For modern scholars, these Manichaean fragments have proved crucial, providing missing portions of the original narrative. By comparing versions across cultures and languages, researchers have pieced together a more complete vision of what the Book of Giants may once have held before time scattered it to fragments. Echoes in Gnosticism. Beyond Manichaean thought, the Book of Giants found kindred resonance in Gnostic traditions. These diverse spiritual systems shared one radical premise. The world we live in is not divine creation, but a flawed construct, a cosmic prison. In Gnostic cosmology, true divinity exists far beyond, while a false creator, often ignorant or malevolent, reigns over the material world. While Gnostic texts don't directly quote the Book of Giants, the thematic parallels are deep and persistent. Both traditions depict flawed creator beings, imprisoned divine sparks, and salvation through secret knowledge. In this vision, the Watchers resemble Gnostic archons, powerful, corrupted rulers who oversee segments of the cosmos. When the Watchers descend and cross divine boundaries to mate with humans, they echo the Gnostic theme of catastrophic boundary violation. The Nephilim, half angel, half human, embody the Gnostic notion of trapped divine consciousness, spirit confined within chaotic, greedy flesh. Their monstrous hunger and endless violence dramatize matter's fundamental instability. A striking comparison emerges with the Secret Book of John, a key Gnostic text. It describes archons lusting after human women, producing fate and bondage, eerily similar to the Watchers' corruption of humanity. Both traditions root cosmic disorder in improper mixing between divine and earthly realms. Even the flood itself is interpreted differently. In traditional readings, it is divine cleansing. But to Gnostics, the flood is the false god's attempt to extinguish awakening consciousness. Some Gnostic sects believe Noah was rescued by Sophia, divine wisdom, in defiance of the false creator. Enoch, meanwhile, mirrors the Gnostic revealer, crossing dimensions, gathering esoteric insight, and returning to relay salvific truths. In both traditions, knowledge is the key to transcendence. Giants in the Book of Giants seek out Enoch's wisdom to escape their fate. Gnostics seek hidden knowledge to escape illusion and ignorance. The early church fathers saw these parallels clearly and condemned both traditions. Irenaeus denounced the Book of Giants alongside Gnostic writings, accusing both of undermining orthodox theology and denying the Creator's absolute sovereignty. These connections were not just theoretical. Archaeological discoveries at Nag Hammadi, the epicenter of Gnostic texts, revealed fragments of literature that show awareness of Enochic traditions. In ancient libraries, these currents coexisted. Even after formal Gnosticism faded, its themes lived on in mystical writings across multiple faiths. Similarly, while the Book of Giants vanished from common usage, its motifs continued to shape how people imagined cosmic rebellion and hidden revelation. Modern seekers, disillusioned by conventional religion, often rediscover both traditions in tandem. These ancient texts offer a different metaphysical framework, one in which the universe is a battleground rather than a garden, where suffering results not from sin but from entrapment, and where secret knowledge is the path to liberation. For both traditions, suffering is not meaningless but a clue. If our world feels broken, maybe that's because it is incomplete. If humans seem out of place, perhaps it's because we are. The Book of Giants and Gnostic myth alike suggest we are fragments of something higher, momentarily lost in a lower realm. These parallels don't necessarily imply direct borrowing. Rather, they suggest that deep human questions often yield similar symbolic answers. When we contemplate cosmic injustice, we often end up with similar metaphors: boundary-crossing angels, half-divine offspring, flooded worlds, and keepers of secret truth. The tragedy of both traditions lies in their near erasure. What survives are mostly fragments, preserved by accident or cited by critics. What might we have learned if these texts had endured? What wisdom was lost to fire, decay, or censorship? The hidden book. For 16 centuries, the Book of Giants effectively disappeared. Readers of the Bible knew nothing of Mahaway's journey or Ohia's dreams. A text once treasured by Jewish mystics and Manichaean philosophers simply vanished, buried by dust, obscured by orthodoxy. Why? Some books survive because of canonization, others perish through disuse or suppression. The forces that preserved Plato and lost Epicurus shaped the fate of the Book of Giants. After the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 CE, Jewish authorities increasingly moved to standardize their sacred canon. Texts outside this emerging core were copied less often, protected less fiercely, remembered less vividly. Over time, that absence became self-perpetuating. Forgotten books became unknowable books. Early Christianity might have offered a second chance. After all, it preserved other Second Temple writings like the Wisdom of Solomon. But the Book of Giants posed special theological problems. Its elaborate angelology, cosmic dualism, and focus on pre-human drama distracted from Christ-centered teachings. Church fathers feared it would tempt believers toward esoteric speculation. And so, while some early Christians likely read it, the book never achieved canonical protection. Practical factors contributed, but theological discomfort ensured its exclusion. The book existed primarily in Aramaic. When Greek became the dominant scholarly language, its scrolls were preserved in remote desert communities that gradually vanished. Each physical copy that crumbled meant another piece of knowledge lost forever in a pre-printing world. The theory that the text was deliberately suppressed remains a popular one, but it's too simplistic. No church council formally banned the Book of Giants. No Roman emperor issued an order to have it destroyed. It didn't vanish by violent erasure, but through slow neglect, an erasure just as effective, just as final. Religious shifts played a subtle role. As Judaism rebuilt in the aftermath of the temple's destruction, its priorities shifted. Focus turned away from mystical speculation toward law, identity, and practical survival. Cosmic dramas, fallen angels, and ancient giants became increasingly irrelevant. Meanwhile, Christianity forged its own foundational stories. It centered its theology on Adam's fall, redemption through Christ, and the authority of New Testament writings. The narrative of giants, for all its drama and grandeur, simply didn't serve the new theological framework. Religious texts survive only when communities find them useful to address their pressing spiritual questions. Then, unexpectedly, came a reversal that no one could have predicted. In 1947, a Bedouin shepherd tossed a stone into a cave near the Dead Sea and heard the sound of breaking pottery. What followed was the most extraordinary discovery in biblical archaeology. Among the scrolls found in those caves were long-lost fragments of the Book of Giants. At the same time, scholars working in European archives began noticing that obscure Manichaean fragments from Central Asia contained parallel material. For decades, these fragments gathered dust, ignored, untranslated, and uncategorized, until researchers began to connect the dots. It became clear that this was the same text ancient writers had mentioned. But even with rediscovery, reconstruction proved daunting. The Book of Giants never existed in a single version. Even in antiquity, it circulated in various forms. The Qumran fragments differ significantly from the Manichaean adaptations. Later references suggest additional versions were known among diverse religious communities. Unlike canonical biblical texts, which benefited from careful copying chains and scribal oversight, the Giants' material remained fluid, decentralized, and vulnerable. Modern scholars faced a labyrinth of challenges. The Dead Sea Scroll fragments were fragile, scattered across different caves and scrolls, faded and brittle with age. Many contained only a few legible words. Piecing together a coherent narrative required immense linguistic skill, deep historical context, an imaginative but disciplined inference. The Manichaean texts added another layer of complexity. They had been translated multiple times, from Aramaic to Greek to Middle Persian to Chinese. Each language added its own cultural flavor, reshaping themes to match new spiritual environments. Determining what belonged to the original Jewish text and what was added later remains a scholarly challenge. And yet, despite all this, scholars have managed to reconstruct substantial portions of the story. We now understand the sequence of Oya and Hea's dreams, Maha's journey to Enoch, the Watcher's judgment, and the Nephilim's despair. While large gaps remain, the fragments offer enough to grasp the narrative that once captivated mystics and theologians. What does this fragmented recovery teach us? That knowledge we thought was lost forever can return. That texts long forgotten can still speak to modern hearts. That fragments, adaptations, and scattered clues can resurrect ancient voices. The rediscovery also challenges assumptions about the stability of religious tradition. We like to imagine a clean timeline of theological development, but the truth is more tangled. Some ideas flourished, then vanished. Others faded, only to re-emerge when the time was right. The reconstructed Book of Giants invites us to reimagine spiritual history not as a linear path, but as a web of stories, some preserved, others buried, all still resonant. And at the center of it all stands one mysterious, enduring figure, Enoch, seventh from Adam, the one who walked with God and was no more. A single enigmatic line in Genesis gave birth to an entire tradition. Enoch became not just a patriarch, but a cosmic traveler. In a lineage of kings and warriors, he was the mystic. He never ruled a nation, never fathered a tribe. Instead, he ascended, one of only 2 humans in the Hebrew Bible to bypass death. That rare status made him an ideal bridge between heaven and earth. The Book of Giants is just one thread in the fabric of Enochic literature. The first book of Enoch, also called Ethiopian Enoch, contains the full story of the Watchers. The second book, Slavonic Enoch, describes his journey through the heavens. The third book, Hebrew Enoch, tells of his transformation into the angel Metatron. Together, they form a kind of apocalyptic library, a sacred archive of heavenly visions, hidden wisdom, and spiritual transformation. The influence of Enoch stretches far beyond these works. The pattern of heavenly ascent, of a human granted access to divine secrets, became the blueprint for apocalyptic literature. Daniel's beasts, Ezekiel's wheels, John's revelation, all echo the structure set by Enoch. Jewish mystics embraced him. Merkaba mystics, those who sought visions of God's throne, used Enoch as a model for human ascent. Kabbalists identified him with Metatron, the celestial scribe. His metamorphosis from flesh to light became the aspiration of spiritual seekers. Christianity, too, was drawn to Enoch. The Epistle of Jude directly quotes from him, calling him the seventh from Adam who prophesied coming judgment. Church fathers like Tertullian regarded his writings as inspired. Though eventually sidelined, the fascination never fully faded. What made Enoch so magnetic? Unlike Moses or David, he founded no nation. Unlike Abraham, he fathered no chosen people. Enoch belonged nowhere and everywhere. Neither fully human nor fully divine, he moved between realms. He was the ideal messenger. In the Book of Giants, when the Nephilim tremble at coming doom, they turn to Enoch. He alone can interpret the language of heaven. He alone can translate divine judgment into terms mortals can grasp. Even outside Abrahamic faiths, Enoch left footprints. Islam reveres him as Idris, a prophet gifted with 30 scrolls of celestial knowledge. Some Sufi orders trace their mystical paths back to his teachings. The Mandeans view him as a great revealer of hidden truths. Modern esoteric movements, from theosophy to New Age spirituality, continue to invoke his name. His story speaks to those seeking transcendence, cosmic connection, and the spark of divine within human form. Even in secular literature, Enoch's shadow lingers. Dante's celestial tour recalls his ascent. Milton's rebel angels nod toward his watchers. Fantasy heroes who gain forbidden knowledge, who walk between worlds, follow in his footsteps. Why does he endure? Because he represents pure spiritual yearning. Where others ruled or sacrificed or taught, Enoch sought. He looked beyond the world's surface and found mysteries shimmering just out of reach. He became what we might become. And that, perhaps, is the true legacy of Enoch. The human longing to pierce the veil that separates the visible from the invisible runs deep across all ages and cultures. The Enochic traditions and stories of giants address this universal question: what truly lies beyond death? Enoch, who did not die but instead transformed, offers a third path, one that veers from both conventional notions of afterlife and the idea of total extinction. His story suggests that consciousness might not merely persist, but could continue in an entirely different and elevated form. His role as a celestial record keeper resonates with fundamental human concerns about the meaning of history. Who bears witness to the unfolding of our collective story? Who remembers what has come before? Who safeguards knowledge through the generations? In Enoch, we find a symbol of the hope that nothing of real value is ever truly lost. For ancient communities experiencing suffering and exile, the Enochic texts brought powerful comfort. His ascent offered a vision of eventual divine justice, and his hidden books, preserved for some future moment, suggested that truth, though buried, would one day return when most needed. This pattern, the motif of concealed wisdom revealed during times of crisis, became a powerful narrative thread that echoed across Gnostic writings, medieval prophecies, and modern apocalyptic beliefs. Though the Book of Giants emerges from a specifically Jewish tradition, its foundational themes resonate around the world. Cultures from Ireland to Indonesia, Greece to Peru tell stories of enormous beings born of sky gods and human women. Greek mythology provides the clearest parallel, with its titans and gigantes, great beings who challenge divine rule, their immense appetites echoing the Nephilim. Their downfall at the hands of Zeus mirrors the biblical flood, a divine re-establishment of order. In Norse mythology, the Jotnar, primordial giants, predated even the gods. Their slain bodies were said to shape the cosmos itself. Bones became mountains, blood the seas. The idea that destruction gives way to creation parallels the flood's cleansing and renewal. Indigenous North American traditions include tales of giant cannibals vanquished by culture heroes, stories that often explain landscape features. Mountains formed by falling giants, valleys created by their footsteps. In Hindu mythology, the Danavas and Daityas, semi-divine giants, battle eternally against the Devas, reflecting the Nephilim's rebellion against divine will. Polynesian stories tell of heroes like Maui outwitting or toppling giants who hoarded resources or imperiled humanity. On Easter Island, the towering Moai statues are thought to connect with ancestral worship and legends of enormous progenitors. Archaeology may have reinforced these beliefs. Early peoples, discovering massive bones without scientific explanation, logically concluded that giants had once roamed the earth. Megalithic structures like Stonehenge or the Moai raised similar questions. Who else but giants could have moved such monumental stones? Across traditions, folk stories depict giants as physically powerful but intellectually sluggish. They are builders of landscapes, symbols of a primal era, and guardians of deep knowledge. Some scholars in the 19th century posited that a single giant myth had diffused across the globe, carried by migrating peoples. Others suggested independent invention, where human minds facing similar existential questions arrived at similar narratives. Modern anthropology supports a hybrid theory. Some myths traveled through cultural contact, while others emerged organically from shared human experience. Dreams of towering beings, encounters with strange skeletons, or awe at ancient ruins. Psychologically, giants represent both our ambitions and our fears. They mirror what humanity might become: larger, stronger, transcendent, and what we dread becoming: monstrous, gluttonous, disconnected from creation. Carl Jung's concept of archetypes suggests these figures arise from deep within the collective unconscious. They express our anxieties about power, proportion, and primordial chaos. Historically, giants appear at the borders of civilization, told by agricultural societies about the nomadic tribes they displaced, or by emerging religions about those they replaced. They embody the other, magnified and mythologized. During colonial eras, European explorers often interpreted indigenous giant legends through biblical lenses, viewing them as confirmation of Genesis. In return, some indigenous communities wove biblical Nephilim into their own lore, creating new hybrid myths. Modern science now offers rational explanations for some of these stories. Remains of mammoths, megafauna, or extinct human species like Neanderthals and Denisovans may have influenced beliefs about ancient titans. Yet what distinguishes the Book of Giants is not just the giants themselves, but the way it weaves them into sacred cosmology. The Nephilim are not mere monsters. They are theological ruptures. Their very existence blurs the boundary between heaven and earth, body and spirit. Their narrative explores what happens when natural categories are violated. They are not simply threats of muscle and size, but embodiments of metaphysical disorder. Their tragedy lies in being neither wholly angelic nor fully human, creatures of spiritual confusion and cosmic imbalance. And they've never really left us. In today's world, the Nephilim have resurged into cultural prominence. More people are fascinated by these ancient hybrids now than at any time in modern memory. From sensational YouTube documentaries to popular Christian prophecy books, from archaeological conspiracies to online sermons, the giants walk again, this time through digital and theological imaginations. In the late 20th century, fringe archaeology gained traction, with rumors of massive skeletons discovered across North America. Though these claims are dismissed by mainstream science, they continue to capture the public imagination. Christian authors like Chuck Missler and L.A. Marzulli gave the topic a new eschatological twist, suggesting that Genesis 6 verse 4, the Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterward, implies that these giants will return before Christ's second coming. They point to Jesus' words that the end times will mirror the days of Noah as evidence. Thus, for some believers, the Nephilim aren't just history. They are prophecy in motion, walking shadows from a world that refuses to stay buried. The ancient astronaut theory, made popular by Eric von Daniken and later by television series like Ancient Aliens, reinterprets the Watchers and Nephilim as extraterrestrials rather than spiritual beings. In this framework, ancient texts are viewed not as myth or metaphor, but as literal accounts of alien-human interbreeding, hybrids with enhanced abilities and forbidden knowledge. Digital culture has rapidly amplified these ideas. YouTube channels dedicated to giant evidence have gathered millions of views. Social media communities dissect Nephilim genetics and speculate on buried histories, spreading theories that once belonged to niche books through viral videos and algorithm-driven feeds that prioritize engagement over scholarly rigor. Video games and fantasy literature have likewise absorbed Nephilim lore, often blending biblical themes with creative fiction. In the Darksiders game franchise, Nephilim are central protagonists. Urban fantasy novels commonly depict them as supernatural beings hidden in the modern world. What drives this revived fascination? Partly, it's the allure of forbidden knowledge, the thrill of uncovering something long hidden, perhaps even deliberately suppressed. The Book of Giants, with its own history of obscurity and rediscovery, perfectly fits the narrative of concealed truths finally unearthed. Psychological factors also play a role. Tales of giants ease existential fears in a vast and impersonal universe. If beings of enormous size once roamed the earth, perhaps our own stature doesn't reflect our true cosmic significance. If angels once mingled with humanity, maybe we carry more than animal origins in our blood. There's a political undercurrent too. Nephilim theories often accompany alternate histories that challenge mainstream authority. They appeal to individuals suspicious of institutional knowledge, offering counter-narratives where personal revelation or outsider intuition overrides expert consensus. From a religious standpoint, Nephilim discussions provide believers with a sense of validation. As secularism dominates public narratives, some seek physical evidence that Scripture is historically and scientifically credible. For them, Nephilim myths supply tangible bridges between faith and the material world. The structure of the internet itself reinforces these beliefs. Search for giant skeletons and academic papers, speculative blogs, and doctored images all appear side by side. Algorithms don't differentiate between rigorous archaeology and mythic reconstruction, allowing misinformation to spread with the same visibility as vetted fact. In this digital environment, More people encounter ancient traditions than ever before. But these stories often circulate stripped of their historical context or theological weight. Modern fiction continues this transformation. Films like Noah, 2014, reimagine the Watchers and Giants with dramatic flair. TV shows such as Supernatural turn Nephilim into powerful, often sympathetic figures. Tabletop and role-playing games incorporate Nephilim-like entities, including Goliath races in Dungeons and Dragons and angelic hybrids in World of Darkness. Even within modern spirituality, traces of Watcher lore remain. New Age circles sometimes reinterpret the Watchers not as rebels, but as misunderstood mentors. Crystal healing guides occasionally reference ancient angelic knowledge tied to gemstones and their mystical properties. What might the ancient authors think of these reinterpretations? Perhaps they would be struck by the durability of their warnings, how their core ideas about transgressing cosmic boundaries still resonate today. In an era of genetic engineering and artificial intelligence, their ancient cautionary tale about crossing forbidden lines feels unexpectedly current. But they might also be bewildered. For them, the Book of Giants was no fantasy. It was sacred narrative, a theological explanation for persistent evil and the hidden workings of divine justice. Today, however, the same narrative is often consumed as spectacle or entertainment. This tension defines many modern revivals of ancient religious texts. We preserve their words, but transform their meanings, using old voices to tell new stories the original authors never intended. Are they coming back? As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. This single verse from Matthew's Gospel has fueled centuries of eschatological reflection. If Jesus likened the end times to Noah's era, and if giants lived in that age, might they return before the final judgment? That possibility has sparked fervent debate in apocalyptic Christian circles. Prophecy teachers frequently cite Genesis 6 verse 4, noting, "The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward," as evidence that giants either survived the flood or reappeared later. The phrase, "and also afterward," ignites speculation. Books like The Nephilim and the Pyramid of the Apocalypse link these ancient beings directly to modern prophecy. Authors claim that buried Nephilim DNA might be reactivated or cloned, producing hybrid entities that fulfill terrifying predictions of tribulation. Such theories gained traction as genetic science advanced. The development of CRISPR, experiments with chimeras, and breakthroughs in synthetic biology all seem to echo the forbidden arts once taught by the Watchers. To some, modern scientists are unwittingly reconstructing the same technological landscape that provoked divine judgment in ages past. These concerns find a home in conspiracy communities. Online forums propose government programs developing human-animal hybrids. Ancient astronaut theorists assert that extraterrestrials, creators of the original Nephilim, intend to return, merging UFO lore with biblical prophecy. While mainstream biblical scholars and most religious authorities dismiss these interpretations, their popularity continues to grow across digital platforms and fringe subcultures alike. The Noah comparison is understood differently across traditions, with mainstream theology emphasizing moral conditions rather than focusing on literal giants. Traditional interpretations stress spiritual preparation over speculative fears of monstrous returns. What fuels the fascination with the giant's return? Part of it lies in the psychological comfort of facing a defined, tangible threat. Grappling with sin or divine judgment in the abstract can be overwhelming, but identifying physical villains, even supernatural ones, makes the cosmic drama more accessible. The giants offer visible manifestations of invisible conflict. Periods of cultural uncertainty also tend to stoke apocalyptic thinking. When rapid scientific or societal change challenges long-held beliefs, some believers lean more heavily on the supernatural. In this context, giant-related prophecies become symbolic anchors of faith, offering solid imagery when doctrine feels unstable. Digital media accelerates these speculations exponentially. What once traveled slowly through obscure books now spreads instantly via videos, blogs, and online forums. One person's interpretation of a cryptic verse can now reach millions overnight, creating a false sense of consensus. Modern anxieties also feed this phenomenon. Concerns over genetic manipulation, artificial intelligence, and transhumanism often find expression in Nephilim lore. Stories of angel-human hybrids from ancient times mirror present-day fears about technological boundary crossing and human enhancement. In UFO communities, these stories take on a new form. The ancient astronaut hypothesis reframes the Nephilim as alien hybrids, and their return is imagined not as divine but extraterrestrial, arriving in ships rather than clouds. This version bridges biblical prophecy and secular speculation, offering appeal to both faith-driven and science-curious audiences. Certain locations have drawn particular attention. Mount Hermon, where the Book of Enoch says the Watchers descended, has become a focal point for theories involving genetic experiments or supernatural portals. Speculation about how giants might return ranges widely. Some foresee literal angel-human unions, others predict hybrid creations through DNA manipulation, and a few interpret Nephilim as metaphors for corrupt global powers. Despite their differences, these views share a common goal: to make ancient texts speak directly to present-day fears. The Book of Giants, then, becomes more than a relic. It becomes a warning. Archaeological rumors add fuel to these convictions. Stories of giant skeletons being discovered and hidden, especially by institutions like the Smithsonian, circulate widely. Though professional archaeologists dismiss these claims, such rejection often reinforces belief among conspiracy-minded audiences. DNA testing is another flashpoint. Some claim ancient bones contain non-human genetic markers, offering proof of Nephilim lineage. Scientists consistently reject these assertions, but in alternative circles, the denial is seen as evidence of suppression. Predictions about the return of giants often tie into broader end-times narratives, such as the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem, the appearance of red heifers, or rare astronomical alignments. The Nephilim story becomes one thread in a complex apocalyptic tapestry. Religious leaders respond in varied ways. Some fully embrace Nephilim prophecies as literal warnings. Others see them as allegory, useful for spiritual reflection but not for doctrinal certainty. Many caution against letting giant lore distract from the core tenets of faith. What often gets lost in modern discourse is the original ethical message. The Book of Giants was not just about physical enormity, but about moral disorder, about spiritual corruption and the breaking of divine boundaries. The giants symbolized cosmic injustice, and their destruction marked the restoration of right order. Perhaps the more relevant question isn't whether giants will return, but what their narrative still reveals about us. Are we like the Watchers, tempted to transgress limits in pursuit of power? Are we like the giants, consuming without restraint, detached from our purpose? Do we respect the boundaries between knowledge that should be explored and wisdom that must be approached with reverence? The ancients viewed giants as more than threats. They were warnings about arrogance, excess, and the price of forsaking divine order. Whether literal or symbolic, their story lives on wherever humans reach beyond what we're meant to hold. That legacy didn't drown in the flood. Their bodies returned to dust, but their imprint on human imagination remained. Not just in fragmented scrolls or forgotten myths, but in how we understand evil, power, and the burden of knowledge. Before psychology or sociology, the Book of Giants gave language to cosmic disorder. It presented evil not as bad behavior, but as imbalance rooted deep in the structure of creation itself, an echo of ancient rebellion. The Watchers' teachings, astronomy, metallurgy, cosmetics, and warcraft, were not condemned for existing, but for being twisted. This is what makes the book's message so relevant today. It doesn't reject knowledge outright. It warns us about what happens when knowledge is used without wisdom, and that is a story we are still writing. The problem isn't simply knowledge, it's timing, context, and intent. Some forms of wisdom require the maturity of preparation. Some technologies demand ethical frameworks before their introduction. And some powers should only be wielded when guided by discernment. The Nephilim narrative also reshaped how ancient minds understood human nature. It cast humanity in a space between the angels and the animals, capable of profound wisdom, yet vulnerable to appetite and temptation. By presenting the giants as hybrids, part divine, part flesh, it raised deeper questions. What defines a human being? Are we governed by reason or driven by desire? Do we bear the imprint of the divine or the pull of the earth? Are we destined for transcendence or bound by limitation? These hybrid beings, tragically torn between realms, embodied those very tensions. Their existence challenged audiences to consider what boundaries shape and protect human life. Artistically, the legacy of these stories echoed through the centuries. Renaissance depictions of the flood, Milton's epic portrayals of fallen angels, romantic fascination with ruins, science fiction's ventures into post-humanity, all carry the fingerprints of Nephilim imagination. Even modern fantasy still leans on the trope of larger-than-life beings wrestling with purpose, morality, and power. Architectural and visual motifs bear their mark too. Medieval cathedral carvings of angels and giants, Renaissance flood frescoes, and science fiction portrayals of ancient astronauts reflect themes first seated in texts like the Book of Giants. Their linguistic imprint also endures. Phrases such as fallen angel, forbidden knowledge, giants in the earth, and antediluvian became part of our shared vocabulary. Even those unaware of their origins still speak in echoes of these traditions. Psychologically, the Nephilim gave us tools for interpreting troubling dreams and vague spiritual unease. They gave form to the sensation that something vast and broken lies just beyond our perception. That feeling of being small against vast, unseen forces, of catastrophe looming, of transformation approaching, found symbolic voice through them. Narratively, these stories help shape how history itself was told. The pattern of a golden age, followed by corruption, then judgment, and eventual renewal appears in many traditions, but the flood story gave it unforgettable form. Modern apocalyptic thinking, whether religious or secular, follows templates first defined by these ancient texts. Ethically, the giants' legacy centers on power and restraint. Their unquenchable appetite, their disregard for creation, their violence, all stand as warnings against strength used without moral clarity. Their downfall cautions against confusing might with virtue. From an ecological perspective, the giants' corruption is read by some ancient interpreters as a metaphor for environmental destruction. They corrupted their way upon the earth, some said, pointing not just to moral but ecological degradation. In this reading, the flood becomes a divine response not only to sin, but to a world made unsustainable. Spiritually, the tale doesn't just end in destruction, it holds out hope. Amid overwhelming decay, divine justice still finds a way. Noah's survival, his ark cradled above the waters, symbolizes preservation in the midst of collapse. Seeds of a new world are saved even as the old is washed away. These traditions also color how we interpret evidence. When 19th century scientists unearthed dinosaur bones or uncovered massive structures, giant lore offered a framework to make sense of them. In religious contexts, the story became a bridge. Flood tales from Mesopotamia, Greek Titan myths, and legends of giants worldwide could all be reinterpreted through a biblical lens, as fragmented memories of what Scripture described in full. Politically, Nephilim narratives have justified conquest. Ancient Israelites viewed Canaanite giants as relics of the pre-flood corruption, lending divine weight to territorial claims. Later, colonial powers similarly applied giant motifs to indigenous populations, casting them as otherworldly or savage. Scientifically, the ancient interpretation of fossils or flood geology wasn't ignorance. It was a rational attempt to understand a mysterious world with limited tools. Most of all, these stories left us with a symbolic vocabulary for life's most overwhelming questions. When reality feels too large, when words fall short, we reach for the mythic. The giants gave us symbols for evil, for imbalance, for the perils of knowledge untethered to wisdom. They asked timeless questions. Why does evil endure? What happens when boundaries between realms collapse? What do we do with power that brings both destruction and enlightenment? Though the Book of Giants was lost for centuries, its core concerns never truly disappeared. They endured through other traditions, symbols, and stories, because the questions it posed are ones no generation can ignore. And maybe that's what the giants truly left us. Not bones beneath mountains, not ruins of impossible scale, but the reminder that we stand always at the threshold between realms, capable of wonder, susceptible to ruin. Like them, We are beings of immense potential, but also bound by responsibility. And like them, what we choose to do with knowledge will shape what survives us. The waters may have receded. The bones may have turned to stone. But the echoes of their story still ripple through the depths of human thought, wherever we contemplate the boundaries of wisdom, power, and being.